And I feel like that's definitely a very different culture in other games, because in other games, again, it's like you get a big shiny drop, it's a lot of money, you sell it, and then like inflation happens and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff, and you have more gold sinks, that sort of thing. But in Guild Wars 2, because they're trying to keep it stable, where people actually make money is you have to take advantage of essentially the inefficient system, right?
Yeah. Whenever I do say I'm new to this, whenever I do say like, hey guys, you have any tips, feel free to chime in. A lot of times I don't get any response back. But for every, let's say, one time I have someone that's toxic and it's like, oh, new player, I'm out. Or something like that, or is like talking smack in the chat or something like that, then I'd say about for every one time that happens, I have 10 times where people are just like very, very kind, very, very approachable, say, oh, okay, well, yeah, did you know about this? Suggesting things, being very polite, and kind of helping out.
Raids, man. It's so frustrating. They're just so misunderstood. Look, it's not about the damage. You know why it's not about the damage? It's not about the damage because the damage requirements to kill the raids before they enrage is so low. It is incredibly low. It is very, very, very low, right? The best of the best teams are killing these bosses with like 9 minutes remaining on the enrage timer, right? So if you are 10% of what they are, 10%, then you should be able to do it.
You do have to at some point be realistic as well, I think, with your time management, right? If you're gonna go for a goal and you know that like it's not the content you enjoy, but it's that it's like a roadblock for you to getting there, you're gonna have to figure that out, right? Like it's just there's no other way around it, right? Hello everyone, welcome. We're back. I am back, and I got a fresh cast of gamers with me today. We're here. The Barons Club podcast returns every 2 months or so. I'm GuildMM, and you guys know these bunch of gamers. Emmy, Sneb, a recent addition to the Guild Wars 2 stream community, Reed here. And yeah, we're here to talk about a little bit of a topic that actually basically got set off with some comments saying that I'm out of touch with gold making and what is reasonable. So I decided, look, I'm gonna take it. You know what? That's fine. I've been humbled by some of my own moderators. So I went about, I gathered some information, I gathered some gamers, and I actually, you know what, wanted to bring some people's opinions here and just what is, you know, a reasonable amount. And I thought, why not start off with the raid community here? So here we go. We got Emmy, Sneb, Reed. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves real quickly, we could start with Sneb, work our way to Reed, and then Emmy.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Sneb. Been a member of the Guild Wars 2 community for basically ever since Guild Wars 1. Started content creation about 3 or so years ago. Shortly got into raids, and then next thing I know, I'm organizing a raid community where we help match people into teams so that they can go and tackle that difficult content with friends. I also stream. Edit.
Yeah.
Hello, chat. You may be wondering, why is really Reed here? He doesn't know anything. He's only been playing for about 5 months. He's poor. He has a literal exclamation point beg command in his chat, so people give him money. That's exactly why I'm here, chat. Like GuildMM said, they needed a perspective from someone that was broke and poor, the very much average player, and I've come to represent the absolute bare minimum average new player who also streams at twitch.tv/reallyreed. Hello.
Okay, my turn. So my name is Emmy. I also do, obviously a lot of Guild Wars 2 content. So I primarily focus in new player outreach nowadays. But in the past, I've had my fair share of gold making things. So I was part of GuildMM's original TP guild. I did a lot of flipping. I did a lot of service selling, which I think is going to be a pretty interesting topic today. And then nowadays, I kind of just play with my own circle, and then every now and then run things like raid trainings or progression groups, or even do random things through LFG, like big community events like the map completion trains, HP trains. That's so yeah, it's me. And I also stream.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, all streamers. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so actually I wanted to, you know, just kick off here, and we kind of went a little bit about this before we went live. To me, you know, I think the biggest problem in this game isn't per se how to make gold. It's more of like how do you get what you have and put it into stuff that you want, right? Because this game definitely rewards you more in materials than it does in gold, and I think that usually starts a lot of the confusion. Players are used to just getting gold outright and then they just spend it on what they need to spend, whereas Guild Wars 2 kind of has a few extra steps to actually get raw gold. But particularly with you guys, because you know the three of you don't particularly engage in gold making routines or any of that that's strictly gold making. Emmy actually is actually a part of the trading guild, so she's already dabbled and she is a, you know, chat, don't let her fool you. She is a baron, you know, in secret.
No,
But
I'm poor.
but but most of your content does involve just playing the game, right? So I'm really curious to kind of understand each of your routines and how do you guys just basically, I want that legendary. How do you go about getting that? What are the basic things that you find that are difficult? What are the things that you find easy? And what resources probably help you acquire whatever it is you're trying to go for? You know, so in particular with raiding, at least we could maybe begin with raiding, and then if there's something that comes out of the scope of raiding, definitely if you'd like to elaborate as well. Anyone of you can go. Yeah.
Order?
Yeah, anyone can go. Anyone can
The
go.
same order.
No, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Sneb's
let's
up
go in the
first.
same order. I'll start.
Yeah.
Because I did go first, right? Anyway,
You can go first if you want.
Yeah, I'll just share my. I don't feel like I really have a super strong routine. I know that some people, they do this particular meta train. They craft all of their daily stuff. They have characters parked at every different daily chest, jumping puzzle thing, jade runestone. They have characters parked at the matriarch and verdant brink so they can log in for 1 split second, kill the matriarch in 5 seconds to get the box. I know people do all of these things, but I just kind of play. I used to do like maybe a mini routine where I'd go and do like Tequaddle and then Chalk, and then I would do the Octovine, and then I'd go do Drakkar, and then that was kind of it. But I just kind of did those ones because I thought they were fun. So when it comes to gold, I've earned all of my gold by just playing. I'm not really a big trader. I played a lot of PvP, I guess, back in the day. I never have really sold services. I just go and I play, and then I sell what I don't need and buy what I do. I don't ever find any of that to be particularly difficult, but before everyone gets all up in arms about that, I think oftentimes when we think of what's difficult, we conflate difficulty with time. Sure, I think it can take quite a bit of time, but I don't think that that makes it difficult. I don't think it's like a challenging CM raid or anything to earn gold. I think it's just a matter of time and knowledge. So I make gold by just playing, and yeah, I'm curious what all of the rest of you do. Look, I'm pressing inventory right now. I've got 1,200 gold. I don't know what to spend it on.
You can send it to me.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have, to be honest.
Oh. Exclamation point bag. There you go.
Exactly. Those melons don't get fed. And for a lot of ways, I'm exactly like you, Sneb. I kind of just play the game. I have done a lot of PvP, a lot of raiding, and that's how I've been able to, so far, at about 1,000 hours in. I've been playing for 5 months. I do a lot of variety of things like in game, right? I've been able to craft 2 legendary pieces, and I also have the legendary neck for free. So I'm at 3 legendaries at this point, which is pretty nice, I think, for myself, for my goals where I'm at. But getting into the game for the first time, it was really hard to understand, like, why in chat everyone was telling me, like, oh, wow, Octovine, such amazing gold. And I would do it, and I'd open up the chest and be like, I got some UIDs, I guess. I don't know. Just gonna throw these on the auction house. It was getting into the game. It's very, very different from most other vertical progression kind of MMOs. Like even looking at SOTO, like there's no new like shungite ore that comes out and it's like, oh wow, every single craft needs a shungite. No, it's just like it's a very, very different experience that was sort of humbling. And I'm also lucky to have a Twitch chat that enables me to gamble a lot too. But most, if any, gold I get from Twitch chat just goes towards gambling, and I never really win, but I always keep gambling. I mean, what about you?
Me, so I would say nowadays I'm kind of in the same boat. I've kind of just like play the game now, and I can kind of go through. I usually think about it like weekly because I have a certain checklist of things that I always try to do weekly. So raids and strike missions definitely at the top of the list, just because the first clear and especially the EOD ones just gives you a lot of like raw flat gold, right? And same thing with raids. Your first clear per week with raids gives you actual raw flat gold, which is really nice. In addition to that, every day I try to do at least home instance farming and the guild hall farming. I think in total that usually only takes me about 15 minutes, and I have the volatile magic gathering tools. And that usually slowly ramps up the volatile magic over time, and then I can eventually convert that wallet currency into actual currency. And then I also frequently do things like daily CMT4 fractals. Usually not every day. I'm too lazy for that. And then like every now and then I'll do like a meta train here or there. Or recently I've been doing a little bit of rift farming, but not for the gold, but actually for the spirit shards because I'm super starved on spirit shards. Rift farming is great for spirit shards.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of like my weekly checklist nowadays. Other than that, I do a lot of things where I'm like helping people. So this is kind of like almost the opposite, right? It's like I have this list of things that I know will generate me a lot of currency in a fairly small amount of time. And then I'll do the same raid like 3 times because there's like a new player that needs it or something like that. And we're trying to get Karen Hart for them. And then we fail Karen Hart like 5 times in a row. And then we end up doing it anyways. So obviously that is like the negative. So I'd say like my gameplay experience nowadays kind of like hovers between pretty profitable things and then not so profitable things. But just speaking a little bit on the things that I used to do, definitely one of the big things that I used to do is I kind of mentioned it in passing earlier, but things like service selling, right? So service selling kind of said with a very loose interpretation of the word. So I remember the first way that I ever generated a lot of gold was back in the day before mounts were a thing. This was before mounts were a thing. I ran Heart of Thorns hero. And that was very uncommon back in the day, right? Because you didn't have mounts to kind of cheese everything. So I had a lot of like mesmers parked in specific locations that would be able to portal people. So I didn't have to go through the effort of like jumping through things myself. And people paid a lot of money for that. I would say like per train, which usually took about 3 to 4 hours, I was probably making about 500 gold. That just a single train. And then I could do that like multiple times per week, whether it was on one account or multiple accounts, right? So that was definitely in the more intense days of making raw gold. And then I also kind of have like this mini system where I do things like processing unidentified gears, processing volatile magic, in general, just like processing materials like the charged quartz, whatever it's called, that sort of thing. And I know that that's where I think MM kind of referenced it earlier. Like, I think that's where the really big disconnect happens between people that are very casual with the game. It's like Reed said, when you open Arc Face and you got some stuff, but you didn't really know what to do with it. And then turning that stuff that you got into workable gold to get that legendary armor, or get that like shiny Black Lion skin off of the trading post. I think that's where a lot of the disconnect happens. So I do actually spend usually at least once a week. I process a decent amount of unidentified gears that I picked up over the week, or I'll like kind of cash in the volatile magic. I'll like actually Imperial Favors is another one. Recently, I've been doing some flipping with Gen 3 legendaries, that sort of stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think definitely that's it's that kind of, I think like when you, I think each of you explained a very similar routine, right? Like the daily gathering, park at the chest, like park a few alts at a chest area, which there are certainly some good ones in the game. There's Pure Marches actually has some really good ones. The home instance node, occasionally running in a train or a meta train. I find that the disconnect usually comes with, like, as soon as it starts with T4s and CMs, that's actually where the disconnect starts. It's not even the units, it's literally the T4s and the CMs. You know, so I find that a lot of people, it doesn't come down to the fact that like the content itself, it's more groups as well. And it kind of sucks because like I always say that like fractals are actually probably the best moneymaker unrelated to like pure trading. Like the amount of money you can get there, especially if you like increase the title, right? Like if you get up to like fractal god, you'd really be making some good money there, like 60 plus gold an hour with everything that you're getting. In some instances, you can even probably right now it's 70 gold because everything's gone up in price. Spirit shards with the rifts, I think a lot of people, and we actually had a discussion on this a few days ago on my stream. Yeah, a lot of people are getting into rifts purely for the spirit shards. And they are dropping some T6s, but the fact that is there isn't a better spirit shard farm other than Rifts right now, right? Not counting the lab, because that's like a once every year sort of content, so it doesn't happen all the time, which we're coming up on anyway in October. But yeah, I think a lot of this disconnect does come with this kind of stuff. Even with raiding, I think raiding isn't going to be the most profitable money making, but it's insane the amount of stuff you can get out of raids. They could just sell to the trading post and turn into gold, and then just use the gold to buy stuff. So I find like where in like such parts of the game do you find that like and I'm talking maybe from a commander's perspective, like from your end, like with raiding, with fractals, where is the biggest problem with people if they want to get legendary armor? And that is definitely something that requires a lot of resources. Where is the issue with them just taking that step? Is it the group? Is it finding the right guild? Is it trying to just find people who are like more or less in their similar skill set? And Sneb, maybe you have more to comment on this, because you have what was it, 100 plus now teams in your Discord or something. Yeah. So yeah, where is that disconnect? And in mind with people having that goal of legendary armor, right?
So what are you asking exactly? You're asking where's the disconnect between people getting like achieving the goal of getting legendary armor?
Yeah, like where do you find the most?
I would actually first.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You would actually.
I was just gonna say, you first kind of have to acknowledge that not everybody really cares about legendary armor. I think legendary armor is like kind of cool, but I think for what most people do in the game, legendary armor is probably a really distant goal, or it is something that is completely unnecessary. It's good, it's a good convenience, but it's not really that important. So a lot of people just don't go for legendary armor. That said, because open world legendary armor is now a thing, I think more people will go after it. When it comes to getting raid legendary armor specifically, the biggest hurdle we see, well, there's probably three. The first one is on NA, there are no groups in the LFG. And if there are groups in the LFG, they're specifically looking for other experienced people. Usually, I'd say it's probably like 70%, 30%. So to try to get experience in raids without some kind of organized guild or team, it's pretty challenging. And people have very specific schedules and whatever. And so when groups are forming might not be in alignment with when they are ready to raid.
Right.
So that's step one. Step two is they've maybe played the game for, let's say, 500 hours or something. And they want to get into raids, and they realize that they have absolutely no idea how any of the combat systems work, how their class works, how the gear works, how the stats work, or any of those things. And they haven't really engaged with them at all. So they might still have their boosted gear, which is okay. It's fine, right? But now they're expected to fulfill a different role, and this is like a totally new language to them. It's a completely different game. And so there's a huge knowledge hurdle that they must overcome. And they perceive this hurdle to be extremely tall because in some ways it is. It's a little bit obscure. You have to go and look for this information in very particular places, and you have to know what to search for, which is usually what gets people. And then finally, you have to combine all of those things and get those 9 other people that are really willing to let you figure that stuff out. There's also, I would argue that, that third one, I'll change it. I think the third one is actually that there's a little bit of dexterity here. I think that if people want to get into raids specifically, they're used to the game being a little bit slower, meaning that they can kind of just chill and auto attack, and there's nothing wrong with that. They can chill and auto attack and kill the bosses. The bosses die in open world and everything's good, but you need to be reacting a lot faster. And so for some people, that may be a bit of a barrier to them. They might have to find ways to overcome that, or the visual clutter of the game gets in the way and they're not used to having to react very quickly. And so there's a lot of training and practice. There's a lot of investment that has to go into getting good at raids. So while they might hear, and that goes for fractals too, while they might hear that fractals and raids provide like really incredible good gold per hour, the investment to get there might be too high for people, or they might look at it and be like, oh, it's just not something that I can do.
Yeah. I'll kind of piggyback off of what Sneb says because honestly, I completely agree. I feel like the issue with raids and fractals is not even necessarily a reward thing, it's an accessibility thing, right? It's like I always use other games as an example, but like if they have like, let's say an automatic party finder, I guarantee if you were to cut the amount of gold that raids give, fractals give by half or even by a fourth, right? Like if it literally gave 1/4 the amount of money, but you could press a single button and it would match you with people of similar skill sets and you could potentially kill the boss that way, the number of people engaging with those systems would skyrocket, right? So I feel like actually one thing I'll definitely say here to kind of really drive in the point is getting your first kill on raid bosses is extremely profitable because you get the first time raiders chest thing, right? And each
Mm.
one of those, assuming that you like pick like the Ritz or whatever it's called, the inscription that's like worth like 3 to 4 gold, each one of those boxes is like worth at least 10 gold. So you can imagine the very first time you ever clear wing 1 ever, in addition to the base amount of gold that you get, you're also going to get 10 gold for each of the bosses. And
Wait,
that's
sorry, I just got to interject here. Is that I thought those were only for CMs.
They're
There's
only
oh,
for
are they only
CM.
for CM? Oh,
yeah,
okay, all
CM
right.
only.
I think
Okay, if that's
there
okay.
might be something that you get. I can't remember. It's been so long, but I'm pretty sure what you're thinking of is for the CMs. Because
Okay.
yeah, the CMs are extreme value. It's like 40 gold every
Yeah.
time you.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
okay. If that's the case, amending the statement there. Yeah. So, but even then, though, it's like the first time to do that kind of content, right? It is wildly profitable. But the number of people actually engaging with those systems is definitely very low. I would say, just like in general, like being able to find the group, the accessibility of finding those groups, making sure that you are prepared to like enter those groups, that's where I think a really big disconnect happens. And I'll kind of actually use fractals as an example where it is done actually slightly better. Of course, there's a lot to be said about the Agni system. But one of the really great things about fractals is that it's naturally tiered already, right? Like you have tier 1 fractals that are super approachable. There's no gear requirement or anything like
Mhm.
that. You can go in, it's like Sneb said, like, the gameplay is a lot slower because the bosses don't have as many mechanics. You kind of go in, just have some fun with it, and then you're good, right? It's like there's no pressure. And then tier 2, it's like it's a little bit more complicated. Usually there's a couple of extra mechanics. Tier 3 is where it definitely starts getting kind of rough. You need to like have a proper team comp with like healers and boon providers, that sort of stuff. And then tier 4 is kind of like now you're at like the top, right? Like now the bosses do a ton of mechanics. The fights are very fast paced. Like you definitely need a healer. You definitely need boon providers. So I feel like there's kind of like a natural progression there. So the ability to go from not doing fractals ever to doing tier 4 fractals, it's a lot more approachable, right? Because you just have a chance to practice the content. And even then, tier 1 fractals, honestly, not that bad. It's definitely not like, fractal god farming, but for the first time, it's just kind of going in, smacking a couple of things. You're getting a decent amount of gold. And actually, it's kind of bringing this back to the whole material processing thing. It's raw gold too, right? When you get those
Yes.
fractal encryption and you open them, you can sell the junk directly to a vendor and you get gold in your wallet that you can immediately use to buy things off of the trading post. Or you can just sell the fractal encryptions outright. You don't have to process like the relics. You don't have to process like all of these like unidentified gears. You don't have to process like this super specific currency that's like only unique to this one thing. So it's like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'll have
Yeah,
it to
makes
Sneb.
sense.
But Reed, actually, this is definitely like a way to pivot to you, right? Because you've actually on stream engaged with fractals and raids. In fact, you went in blind, from what I hear, right? Like a blind run, and just
Yes.
friends told.
I've
Yeah.
Yeah. So me and a bunch of other people coming from WoW, from Final Fantasy, about 8 or 9 of us in total, kind of came over here. And we were giving just the raids a try completely blind. We did it without knowing anything about the fights. We went completely unguided. We did have one friend in the group that was knowledgeable because he was the husband of one of our raiders. And we just told him, don't give away anything. Even for a boss like Matthias, we had him stand away from the puddles before we figured it out. Like he just died with the corruption on him before we figured out the puddle mechanic in like 2 or 3 pulls. So we were very, very lucky to kind of have this experience that was effectively like progging it for the first time. And I think when we're talking about like getting into raiding, the raids are actually very accessible. They're very learnable. We figured out most raid fights within a day or two. And we even did them on CM for the first time on every single boss except for Doom and Quantum 1. We did every single boss on CM before ever touching the normal mode. So we did that. We didn't have an entirely skilled group. We had friends who had played MMOs before, sure, but if anyone watched it, like they are not. A lot of them were not good players. There's a very different skill set coming into Guild Wars 2, and even in other games, they weren't like they're just casual players. We're playing a lot of casual friends, and I think legendary armor as a kind of reward is great for a long run, like long-term kind of reward, right? And the gold you get from it plays into that as well. But I can tell you from my experience, like the people coming from other MMOs coming into Guild Wars 2 did not care. They cared what they immediately got. And when a lot of that stuff has to be processed and a lot of it isn't really like the coolest looking gear. There are some cool like weapon drops that drop every once in a while, but it's like very rare. It's a very different experience from what you might have in another raid in another game, where you can get in very, very quickly with an LFG, like with WoW or Final Fantasy. Oftentimes, like the final boss might have a mount that drops. There's like cool armor sets to collect. There's a lot of problems with the rating system that I think that it doesn't encourage a lot of new players to get into it from a cosmetic standpoint too. And then a lot of the rewards are either kind of obscured, other than the first time reward like Emmy was talking about, or they are a very long-term investment. And if you look at legendary armor, right, it's not just raiding. You're also doing things in the open world. You also need quite a bit of gold to get it for the first time. The ascended gear is sick though, because that's pretty easy to get. It's free, but
yeah, I think
legendary.
this is a problem. Well, for me, like in terms of like looking at it like just from an economy, it's a very well done economy system they have in Guild Wars 2,
100%.
right? It's comparison to other MMOs, they've done really well with this one. The issue is because it's a material based economy, it does create these tendencies where you'll jump into content. No matter what you do, like very few parts of the game will outright give you the gold, right? You get materials, then you take those materials, you have to do stuff to them, right? Like you have to either sell them directly to the trading post, the stuff that you can't sell, you have to maybe craft them. And even some of the stuff comes in the form of currencies, right? And the game doesn't tell you that, right? And this is, I think, an issue that comes up with a lot of players is that they'll farm in the open world, or the raid or something, and if they had the tracker on, the tracker will tell them you've made 30 gold an hour, right? But that's not in the wallet. That's 30 gold worth of stuff that you just get, and maybe 2 gold of that is even in your wallet. And I think that just complicates the systems even more. It's created a really well done system in the whole game as a whole. As someone who's into money making, it's actually very much appreciated, but it's very much frustrating for most players in the game because, yeah, the systems doesn't tell you that you have to go sell this or you could use this for that. I think they're doing that now a little bit where, like, if you hover over some items, it might tell you what it could be used for. I think they're just slowly introducing stuff like that. I think with T6s, I saw that. What was it? Well, not with T6s. It was something. I can't remember. But they're starting to put, like, a little bit of, like, tips into the materials. But yeah, I do agree with raiding and even with fractals. It's the instant stuff that you are getting. It's not necessarily legendary armor is like way long term, but definitely with even the stuff that you're getting like outright, right? As soon as you're done with the with whatever the encounter is. I did not know that you actually were going in almost fully blind with even the people you're playing with. I thought it was you and people from Guild Wars 2. But the fact that it was like all of you or most of you actually. It's pretty interesting because you guys cleared them.
It was fun.
Yeah, I actually enjoy that like idea of like, you know, figure it out with people together, right? Because when you get the like aha moment, it makes the kill much more right satisfying. Like yes, we got it done because of us, and that's it, right?
The chat must have been so frustrated during MO. They were literally calling it like a golem boss, and we were like, I don't know, dude. Like, does the chess piece turn into a queen at the end and turn like the entire board on fire? Is that what's happening? We were like drawing out diagrams for all of it. I highly recommend to anyone that has not done raiding before, try to kind of form a group, whatever you can do, especially if you have a commander tag. Try to form a group of blind people. We actually, when we were missing people, we actually did find experienced people that were willing to hop into Discord with us. They weren't going to give away strats. They weren't going to like do things with their character to make it obvious, like this is where you should stand. A lot of people actually tried to allow us to have a most blind prog as possible, and it was Really a sublime experience. A lot of fun. Really highly recommend. But Guild MM, I want to ask you this because this game obviously has a very, very processing based economy, right?
Mm.
There's not a lot of raw gold to be made. Do you have much experience in other MMOs?
Yeah, I played RuneScape, WoW, BDO, Warhammer for like the year it was out and then closed down.
All right.
Um,
So then
yeah.
I'll talk to what I know here. In World of Warcraft, did you ever try to make like a lot of gold in that game as well?
Not really, no. I actually
Mm.
enjoyed WoW for the game it was. So I played WoW from release until only Wrath. So like I'm one of those
Oh,
people.
okay.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who left after Wrath.
Yeah.
So I found that in WoW, a lot of like the gold and getting resources and money making. There's certainly a community for it, and there's certainly traders in those games for it. Even now in retail, there's actually some cool farms that I've seen from a few friends of mine who told me about them. But in WoW, I found that it was very much like I'm not saying this is not in Guild Wars 2 because I have seen it here as well. In WoW, it was very much like community, like guild, like helping each other, just gather resources together, right? Like
Four
I'm
by
not,
fours are huge.
yeah, like like even when you're, especially when you're gearing for raids, in WoW, like almost everybody in the guild is like, just before they even get rid of anything, who needs this? Does anyone need this? And it was,
A little bit.
yeah, I found it more, I think I just found it more in WoW than I did in Guild Wars 2, but I have been lucky to be a part of some communities in Guild Wars 2 who have that same mindset of like, let's get what we have and then let's just like find out what people need in our guild. Yeah.
I would say from my experience that Guild Wars 2 in general is a lot more of a gold-focused mindseted game. Like, coming from the community in WoW to Guild Wars 2, the amount of people that talk about, worry about, and discuss gold per minute is massive. You might find some pockets of people that are like, oh, if I do 4x4s, if I do this, I can farm this amount, I can make raw gold here. But it's very, very few and far between compared to here in Guild Wars 2, where it's a lot more of a focus because you can turn gold into gems. You can buy gem store items. You can get convenience. You can get cosmetics. A lot of that is derived from gold. And the interesting thing is that I don't think their markets are entirely different, right? So, for example, when we're talking about processing, while there is overall less kind of processing in World of Warcraft, people who do find those niches, who find those niches when it comes to currencies, those niches when it comes to like kind of turning raw materials into processed, kind of like fully upgraded crafts, like there's still a lot to be made there. And raw gold is in general also still like the slowest kind of process to make gold. It's very, very similar in that sense. It's just that in Guild Wars 2, there is never like, it doesn't seem like, at least from my experience with SOTO, there's never really going to be something that's like, okay, this is the biggest farm. It just came out with a new expansion. It's going to make you millions in a day. Like, that's what we're talking about in WoW, right? People hype up the big new thing with each expansion. In SOTO, I haven't noticed anything kind of like amazing blast open. I don't see my YouTube feed filled with like gold farmers coming up with all new strats. And like I said, there's no new kind of material here, right?
There is actually. I would say there is, which is, it is to do with rifts. And I'll touch on the Wizard's Vault as well, which we actually a little bit talked about how Wizard's Vault has actually encouraged people to get into other kinds of content because the rewards from the Wizard's Vault are actually not bad. They're pretty okay, especially if you are going to be able to in a season. I think you can earn up to like what 15 or 16,000 astral acclaim. Even if you get like 5 or 6k, you could spend a lot on some of like the stuff like the Mystic Coin discount, the raw gold discount, the tier 6 discount. But no, there is something with Soto, which is to do more with rifts, and it's to do with the motivations. You know, the ones that you need the motivations to go hunt rifts, right? So what the motivations require, they require a lot of essence. So, well, you can only get that by doing rifts. So there's time related expense there. Research notes, another kind of dilemma there with time and crafting. And then you also have like T6 materials and ectos. So the interesting about the motivations is that each tier, of course, has the higher tier. The tier 3s has more resources. Tier 2, Tier 1 slightly less, but they're all using the kind of same amount of resources, like the same ones at least. That's where the money making aspect right now, at least with Soto, has come through, right? It's literally through rifts. So people are farming rifts to create motivations to then sell on the trading post. People are farming rifts to get the motivations to, of course, just get their essences and stuff like that. People are farming rifts for spirit shards because it's the biggest bottleneck when it comes to crafting a lot of like high-end stuff. And it is XP related. And
Would you say this is one of the best farms to do, or like the best farm to do, or is it simply competitive with similar farms that are out there?
I'd say right.
At least at the beginning, it was really good, right? Like, wasn't it like really, really good at the beginning with T3 like motivations and stuff?
Yeah.
I think since then the market has kind of settled, and I kind of wanted to jump in here and mention this, but it's like you were mentioning like in WoW and in other games, kind of like when new expansions come out, it's kind of like this mad gold rush, right? Because there's a lot of new, I guess, currency that's there to be made. I feel like something that ANET has always been historically very, very careful with is to make sure that they don't mess up the market too much, right? I think that's actually like one of the core reasons why we have so many different currencies. The purpose is to keep those old currencies relevant, right? The point is to keep like gold at a relatively stable amount, right? So it's like when they introduce these new currencies, these new farms, I'm sure they've like probably pretty carefully calculated it so that over time it'll kind of like plateau again in terms of its, right? So in my experience, especially with like the Wizards Vault, a lot of like the YouTube videos and hype and everything is to kind of get the most efficient way to get things, if that makes any sense. It's not the matter of like, this is worth so much more than what we've had before, but of the system that they gave us, this is the most efficient way to take advantage of it. And I feel like that's definitely a very different culture in other games, because in other games, again, it's like you get a big shiny drop, it's a lot of money, you sell it, and then like inflation happens and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff, and you have more gold sinks, that sort of thing. But in Guild Wars 2, because they're trying to keep it stable, where people actually make money is you have to take advantage of essentially the inefficient system, right? So it's like, I think that's definitely where it's like a lot of the disconnect happens.
I think that's a good thing overall also. Like, I think the economy in Guild Wars 2 is probably my favorite economy I've ever really engaged with in an MMO, because it's not so bang or bust, right? Like, we have a very common saying in like WoW or 5.14 where it's just like exploit often, exploit first, exploit fast, right? Like, if something new is out and it's like very, very good, don't tell anyone about it. Don't make a big deal about it on the forums. Just take care of it. Do your own thing. Make all your gold. Just keep on moving, right? It's like, when a new expansion comes out, just do everything you can to make as much gold as possible, and then in WoW you can just pay for your sub that way, and then you never have to give Blizzard a buck. It's great.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's died down. I say the rifts, actually, I think it's gonna maintain, especially because we got something that mentioned that they will do like a tier 4, right? So I think it will kind of go up. This is the kind of cool thing about the game, is that they can do very well when they engage with something that can sync, because the issue with Guild Wars 2 is material sinks, right? Every now and then they have to come up with something to get rid of items. You guys will remember in EOD, didn't really get much out of the Gen 3s. Like, the amount of stuff required to make Gen 3s was very minimal, right? They just kind of spread a bunch of things to do it, but not one material kind of really stuck out. And what we had with EOD was you just had materials going down and down in price. There wasn't a sync for Ectos. To the point where T6s, like a Gift of Might and a Gift of Magic, those, T6 materials to make those, both gifts together were like barely 300 gold. People were making them for like 290 gold. Ectos were like 10 silver, 11 silver. And so Guild Wars has to combat that with always trying to add something to get stuff out of the game. 4 Winds is a good yearly festival. It does that very well because it's mostly based on people gambling and opening the boxes. I don't know if you guys engage with that kind of content, but clearly a lot of players like the idea that they could maybe be 1 box away from getting the infusion, right? It's always that 1 drop away. But stuff like that doesn't happen.
I did get the
often.
Jock infusion from the box, so I guess
did
I
you?
have.
Oh, okay. So it paid off for you.
La-ti-da.
I've got the, what's that one called? The crystal branded one or whatever that is. I got that one, and I got the Jock one.
Very cool.
Yeah, then I stopped.
Honestly, good on you, because most people would have continued for like confetti or something.
Yeah, no, I just bought the
Indeed.
confetti after that.
Wow. So I want to go back to a little bit about the simple routine systems, right? Like the daily node farming from the guilds, the daily home instance nodes. To me, I don't find them very profitable to have. In fact, I consider home node instances to be a negative that you should never invest. However, if someone has it, you might as well make money out of it. But it is good for like that instant per day. Like I could get at least one of this, one of that. Like it's a very convenient place. You just go to it, harvest, and then it's done, right? So it's kind of like more. You won't make the money that you'll ever make from investing into it, but it's a nice like just you get it and stuff like that for whatever you're working on. How do you guys find that stuff like in your when you're trying to make something, like if you're just, I don't know, going for like another weapon, if you're just, there's a few things you want to buy from the trading post. Do you find that that kind of stuff really drags, or do you feel like it passes by very fast and you don't really feel that like, oh, it's taken me a month to get this thing, because it takes a month to really make anything out of like those kind of simple stuff, or even chest parking?
I'll kind of chime in here first and say I do agree with the home instance farm thing. I bought a few of the nodes when the nodes were worth a couple thousand gold each. So I still am in the negative even
Oh,
after how
okay,
long
yeah.
this was before they added it into the blackline statuettes, right? So like each node was worth like 1,000 gold or something. So still paying off my debts, but other people can. I'm happy to like let them farm my instance. So there's very much a social aspect there. But for me personally, I would say that one of my favorite like idle things to do is to do meta trains and stuff, right? It's like I'm sure this was intentional by ANET, but a lot of the metas are kind of lined up back to back, right? So for example, if you look at the EOD metas, you can go directly from Seitung to Kaining to Echo Vault and then possibly even DE, right? So it's like it's a very nice like kind of like chill low down thing. Like let's say it's like a Friday night, tired from work, I just want to like game, don't really want to talk to anyone. I feel like if you do that kind of stuff, to me personally, the time actually flies by really quickly, right? Because I feel like a big part of it is I'm actually just playing the game, right? It's like when you're doing the meta events, you are engaging with the combat system. You are doing events. You get to admire the scenery and the different maps and stuff. And it's a decent amount of gold. It's nothing like super crazy, assuming you're not doing any super crazy, like, material processing or stuff. Like you're still getting a decent amount of unidentified gears. And even if you just sold that directly on the trading post, probably that about 2 hour session, right? It's just kind of like doing metas very casually, kind of like with your brain turned half off. You're probably making a decent 15 to 20 gold in that entire time with very minimal effort. And I feel like if you do that, like it doesn't have to be every day. If you just do it every now and then, eventually that gold starts racking up. And I feel like another thing is early into the gaming experience or in the Gyorsu experience, there's a lot of stuff that you want to buy, right? There's a lot of convenience items that you have your eye on. But kind of over time, as you settle into those convenience items, like slowly the number of things that you need kind of dwindles down and the gold starts stacking up. And I feel like that's when people go for this chase item, right? It's like once you've kind of settled on the convenience already, you're like, hey, I kind of want something else to do. Let me maybe try getting that legendary. So yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, I find that most people also give that same thing. It's like it is slow, but it's like slow and steady, but like you'll eventually kind of get there. And I think sometimes that does kind of drive a little bit of frustration when players feel like it's, like it's taking them 7 months to get, or because there's certainly a lot of those posts that, and they're still very much popular now when someone crafts their first legendary, and they upload it to Reddit or something, right? And it's like a feels good moment, right, for them. But like when it's their first legendary with 2,000 plus hours in the game, 3,000 hours, and it's definitely like it shows that it's like, yeah, okay, there's a little bit of a mismatch there, I guess, with the time it takes. Not saying that they take all 3,000 hours to make it, but after I find that like most players that I know who generally try to go in through as many shortcuts, right? Because if there's a shortcut, most players who really want something will kind of, I'm not saying, by the way, the chat, that the ones who will swipe your credit cards. No, if you swipe your credit card, you're cheating. Just playing the game. I find that a few of the friends that I know who aren't even money makers in other games, they will find somewhere to get the legendary in around maybe 1,500, 2,000. Like the first 1,000, I feel like for Guild Wars 2, honestly, you're just getting to know the game system. You've had some hours in raiding, some hours in fractals, lots of hours in open world, maybe WW if you're there. But the first 1,000 hours probably gives you a lot of perspective in the game, assuming you've actually went about every single content. Right? But the one thing is, I think, and this is again, it goes back to your question, Reed, about other MMOs, right? I think communities honestly creates a huge gain when you're trying to go for something. And I'll actually use an example from you, Sneb. A few months ago, you needed to create a first EU guild for your Discord, right? Like you're trying to get another guild started up.
Yep.
And what ended up happening was, how many came through donations? Like almost entirely the community donated, and then you put in a big chunk for the second guild yourself.
I put about 4,000 gold in, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then the community put about 8,000.
Yeah.
Oh,
and yeah, the guild, and it was like, it's not even a specific like goal or like a item, right? It's like literally a community incentivized goal, like which is the guild. So I find that when you can get into a community, actually, it can be very, very profitable, not just for you, but for everybody. And this is actually one of the reasons why we even made Overflow to begin with. Like it was supposed to be like a resource sharing Discord, where traders just come in and kind of not spill the secrets, but at least give you the methods, but you have to figure out the sauce in the method, right? And certainly with the trading guild that we had initially, the Emmy and Iron, it was supposed to be more or less like that. We just, anyone who wants to make money with other people, come into the guild. What do you have? What do I have? Let's make something happen, right? And this is more on the gold making aspect. But in a few other guilds, there are people I think that engage with that stuff where they have like a guild's vault where like they actually will use the guild's vault for the guild. Like, guys, we have like this many materials, we have this much gold. Member whoever it is, member like 100 is like almost close to getting his or her legendary. They just need like 300 gold. Let's see how much we can pull in for that. I don't know if that still happens today, but it was very much common. I found it very common in like around 2015 to like 2018. Like a lot of guilds literally just pulled resources together. Not because there was a tax or anything in the guild. It was just people threw stuff in, and it's like if anyone needs it, it's there, right? And then the leaders or the officers, it was up to them to like manage that responsibly, of course, and make sure like it's everyone's getting like a fair shake.
Yeah, I know at least one situation where actually, to be fair, it was a very small and like tight knit guild. It wasn't like, they didn't actively advertise. And I was just kind of almost like a peripheral friend to them. They kind of had about 7 to 8 people and they did a lot of like consistent raiding. At one point, they had pulled in someone new for them, right? And like basically the rest of the guild kind of like pulled together resources so that they could get their first set of ascended gear, which if you've ever like done your first set of like crafting and everything, that costs like a couple hundred gold. So I'd say like in this case, right, it's like, it's not even a matter of like gold making. I would say it's a matter of like the social aspect, right? It's like I actually know that this is pretty common in other MMOs, where it's like if you go into like certain raids and stuff, your guild will just run the same raid over and over again so that you can potentially get a drop that you need to upgrade your gear, right? So like even though there's nothing really in it for the other members of the guild, they still do it just because a member of their team needs that help. But I will say I don't know if that's like necessarily the norm. It's just one situation that I know of. But something that I did also kind of want to chime in and mention is that the social aspect, I feel like the gold is not liquid, but the gold is like the knowledge, right? Like there's a lot of things that you can get just knowledge from other people that will enable you to make gold. So, I mean, raiding is a very easy example of this, right? Because you can learn how to raid. And when you learn how to raid, then you make the gold from raid. But I would say there's a lot of other stuff, right? It's like very frequently, even in my own guilds, people will ask, what do I do with this thing? Right? Like this specific material or whatever it's called. And people will chime and they'll be like, oh, hey, you can check Fast Farming's website. And I check Fast Farming's website. That's how you do this thing. Or for example, if like a guild is getting together and then they're running like rifts together or something, right? It's like, hey, I'm like gonna run some T3 motivations for the weekly. Anybody want to join? Right. So it's like I feel like that kind of knowledge is worth its weight in gold. So to speak.
True.
So
Yeah. I find that actually, Sneb, you might actually find this interesting. But we've been seeing on the Overflow Discord there's been quite a lot of like players who don't normally command step up and command for rifts. I don't know if it's because it's so easy. You just click the motivation, find the rift, go to it, kill it, and then do the same thing again. We've been seeing a lot of people like that. And in fact, I've been seeing a lot of people pull in together to create the motivations together, therefore like basically spreading the cost around a few people to make them, and then they just play together, grind for some spirit shards. I don't know if you've noticed it, but I've certainly seen a lot more people tag up who some you would say would never have tagged up before, or Rifts just kind of like gave them like a step in to actually do it.
Yeah, there's something going on there psychologically. Well, I mean, let's talk about why people don't command things that are not rifts first. I think there's maybe a few reasons. One, a little bit stressful, right? Everyone's looking at you. People want you to go and give them instructions. If they fail, it's on you. And so that stress kind of, will prevent people. But there's also another part that kind of goes with the stress, is that you kind of have to know what to do. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? You don't have to be perfect, but people perceive that you need to be perfect. So they're maybe putting a little bit of pressure on themselves. But everyone's going to be like, well, where do we go? What do we do? And so you're putting down the markers, you're telling people, giving instructions. Like you see this all the time when people are commanding an organized triple trouble. They're explaining the entire meta event, what's going to happen at each part, and all of that sort of thing. But let's consider rifts. Rifts, you do not have to do that at all, right? Rifts tell you exactly where to go. And there's a thing on the map, and you just go there and kill the boss, and that's it. So no instructions are required. So suddenly a lot of pressure is actually relieved from the commander. The commander is mostly just a hero that's helping guide people along a little bit and just telling people that there are other people doing the event. But the rift is the functionality. It's telling you exactly where to go. You press the button, it's on the map, it's on the screen. It makes it just easy. It makes it so easy. And so I think that is a great way to get people a little less scared of putting on that commander tag for sure.
100%. Like, I'm afraid to put on my commander tag in open world metas. Like, arguably some of the easier content in this game, but I haven't ran these metas more than maybe once while I was going through the story. Maybe I just hit like the big death dragon over in Jai High once and like I moved on with my day. I don't know all the little intricacies. I don't know if I need to set up squads for this. In a raid, I know what I'm doing at this point, right? I know I need to have quickness, alacrity, I need to have a healer in each group, easy peasy. But when I go into open world, I actually get a little bit frightened because I am still so new. And I don't want to fuck over people's time. Sorry if it's like not okay to curse, but I just don't want to. You can only, if you fail a meta, you just wasted like 30 minutes of everyone's time that joined on you, right? So it's actually a little bit more nerve-wracking than braiding. And to that same degree, like rifts are such a great opportunity, and I can't wait to see what they do with like their instance versions with the tier 4s or tier 5s or whatever. And I hope they do kind of scale up the difficulty a little bit, make it to where the fail cons aren't too bad, but make it to where like maybe you go in with a group of 20 into this instance area or group of 16, whatever it ends up being. And like, there's some mechanics you actually have to pay attention to. You have to dodge a little bit of teamwork. I think that would be amazing, right?
Yeah, but I don't know what happened to Sneb. He keeps in and out, but
yeah, I don't know why I'm cutting out either. I don't think it has anything to do with me. But
yeah. Anyway, yeah,
based.
You'll get here to us, buddy. You don't worry. I actually agree with this. I think funny enough, a lot of people don't really take open world in the same manner as instance stuff in Guild Wars 2. I can't comment on other MMOs because I don't know how prevalent they are in WoW. I tried open world and it's just that game's not built for open world. It's just a lot of clutter. I did like an open world event in Dragonfly, and
which one?
I don't even know. It was it was a friend of mine. We were doing it because I needed to get like a piece of gear. And there was like this. It was like this boss that spawns every 2 hours or something near basically where's the dragon outpost up in the mountain, like up at the top.
Yeah.
Like there's a meta somewhere downstairs. You kill like a bunch of enemies. It's like a time, what's it called? Time warp?
Oh, the time rifts.
Time rifts, yeah. So yeah, it's just so cluttery. So everything is
100%.
yeah, but in Guild Wars 2, honestly, open world is like one thing that ANET does really well in this game. Almost like it. I don't think there's any other MMO that could really match ANET's open world.
WoW is trying its best to catch up.
Yeah.
It's trying its best. Like I was playing it recently because I'm gonna try to get Hall of Fame with like Teapot's Guild and whatnot. And doing their newest open world event, it's such a mess without a commander tag. Like they have like a lot of the same makings, but because there's a lot less organization, it just feels like I don't know where I'm supposed to go. Everyone's out doing different things. No one's really working together. I don't know where the groups are. And it just like it really goes to show that like how well Guild Wars 2 does what it's like best at, right?
Yeah. But to go on that, like, I think, yeah, most people who do tag up, it's funny because there's a lot of people who've done metas. I know you said you haven't done most of them more than a few times. It's very understandable that you would want to tag up, but there is a lot of players who have probably run like Jahai, Death Branded Shatterer. They've run a lot of Drizzlewood, LS4. Like they've literally, they know exactly where to go, but for some reason, the moment they tag up, it's like they're a little bit stuck or something, right? Like they've done it hundreds of times, but they just feel like the moment that they're now in charge of the squad, it's somewhat different. It's not. I don't see it so much so. I think the differences between a squad in open world would definitely be like the commander who is actually going to put people into subgroups versus the one who's just going to tag up and then just go where you need to go for the meta, right? And most content in the open world, 99% of it, you don't really need subgroups. You can honestly just one-shot everything, get through everything. Dragon's End, you kind of need a bit of coordination, even with like non-coordinated subgroups in Dragon's End. Even like right now, even after like multiple nerfs, you could fail if people aren't like actually focused up and do what you need them to do, right? Like break the CC, you spread out evenly, whatever, kill like the Thorn Hearts that will CC the players themselves. But most content doesn't require that. So I think, subgroups for, players who raid and are comfortable like creating subgroups in Instanced, will find that it's weird that you don't have to do it in the open world. However, it does make your job easier. It does make the game or make the meta go faster, right? Like pretty much you can kill 2-3 minutes of time if you just have the right people in the right group, and if you have the right people doing the right stuff, like with damage and boons and whatever. It is a bit too over the top for an open world, but we've tried it out. Like, we've had trains where we compared it. Like our average run, let's say for something is 2 hours, with people actually focused up and doing subgroups and everything in the open world. The same train runs for like an hour and 40 minutes, right? Like you could shave 20 minutes of your time, which also can give you a little bit of a problem because if you're running on a routine, then you still have to wait for the next event anyway. So it's kind of like you're just basically adding like more like water breaks or something. Or you could maybe, I don't know, find something to fit in those downtimes so that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to do it if you're just running like as slow as you would normally.
You actually bring up a good point there. I think part of the pressure from like commanding an open world, right, is like in addition to just like painting a target on your back, right? Like you're literally have a big beacon above your head saying, "Hey, pay attention to me," which can be kind of stressful. I feel like you actually don't get those breaks, right? Is like when you can play like as a member of the squad, but you're not leading the squad in those downtimes when you're waiting at like that chalk Garant wall, or if you're like waiting for like the Octavine to spawn and all that stuff, you can kind of walk away, right? Like you can go get some water, you can maybe alt tab, browse Reddit a little bit, you can like chat with friends on the side, that sort of stuff. I feel like as a commander, you have to be there the whole time, right? Because like you never know when people are going to ask questions. You don't know if like, oh, maybe I forgot something here or something like that. And I feel like that in and of itself adds a lot of pressure because now you don't have that natural break that kind of like exists inside of those metas. And I feel like in a lot of ways that can be very mentally exhausting, right? It's like you do it for like 30 minutes and you're like super worried, like, oh no, is somebody gonna judge me if I like say something wrong here? What if I accidentally ignore this person and all that kind of stuff? It can be very fatiguing. So I feel like that's also a big reason why people don't really like to command that much. But I would also go so far as to say, like, especially if there's, I don't know if you're planning on uploading this to YouTube or if there's anybody just lurking here. I feel like very much like a self-made pressure, right? It's like you don't have to be there all the time. If you just type something like "be right back" or something like that in like chat, like nobody's gonna care, right? Like if you have to like walk away or that sort of thing. I feel like also sometimes there's a bit of a fear of like speaking up and exposing that you're like new to that kind of thing, right? In a way, it's almost like you're making yourself vulnerable. But I actually think there's a lot of people that appreciate that, right? It's like if you said like in your squad chat, like, yeah, this is my first time commanding someone else, feel free to chime in if I'm like forgetting something. You're kind of like you
100%.
are relieving the pressure on yourself, and other people can kind of step up and like help out with it. But I do feel like there's almost like it's really strange. There's almost like a taboo with saying that, right? It's like I think people are just too scared of like being flamed out that they like don't know what they're doing. But I definitely think this is like where it's like perception versus reality is very different. So
Coming from my experience as like a kind of new player, right, and a new commander in the last like 3 months or so, whenever I do say I'm new to this, whenever I do say like, hey guys, you have any tips, feel free to chime in, a lot of times I don't get any response back. But for every, let's say, one time I have someone that's toxic and it's like, oh, new player, I'm out, or something like that, or is like talking smack in the chat or something like that, then I'd say about for every one time that happens, I have 10 times where people are just like very, very kind, very, very approachable, say, oh, okay, well, yeah, did you know about this? Suggesting things, being very polite, and kind of helping out. Like the community in Guild Wars 2, I think, is actually exceptional. There are bad apples, for sure. But overall, I think like every time I've had anxiety about doing something in this game, it's proven to be unfounded. It's proven to be like I can just do this. I can just say I'm new. I can just kind of make it clear I don't know exactly what I'm doing. And people are very, very accepting of that in open world, in instances. I mean, maybe less so in PvP. People are a little bit toxic there, but that's, it's PvP in any game.
Yeah. No, I think like it's definitely like the idea of like I don't want people to know that I don't know this particular thing. Oh, Sneb's dead again. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is, to be honest. Do you wanna? I don't know if you disconnect and reconnect, it's gonna solve it. It might mess up our window browsers.
Do
But
you want me to try it?
why not? Mix it up. We're gonna have chaos chat.
Okay, 1 second.
Oh, chaos. There we go. Everyone's all over the place.
uh,
Oh, there we go.
I am. Ooh.
Good, because my next
Oh.
question was gonna be to you, Sneb. You certainly now read's done. Interesting. I don't know this.
Oh, now
Yeah.
you're.
Is it
Oh,
just
now
my
MM
position?
is gone on mine. I think this might just be like a Discord connectivity thing.
Yeah, I think
Maybe. Well,
Discord's been having
Discord
some
was
issues
acting
recently.
up yesterday, so maybe it's not done yet. I don't know if you guys know, but yeah, Discord has issues. So my next question is to you, Sneb, right? Because in your raid groups, there is this idea that especially for progression groups, that you prefer that not one person lead, but several kind of just more or less like just pick it up, right? Like pick up the leadership and figure things out together so that each person in a group assigns themselves kind of like a role and takes responsibility for that. I'm sure you've encountered like some of these things where like people are anxious, a little bit, sort of scared to go up and put themselves out there. Like in your experience, like what was the best way for people to work around that?
You just have to do it.
You just have to do it, huh?
Like you might be a little bit anxious, and that's natural. I think everybody to some extent is a little bit anxious about putting themselves out there, talking in front of people, speaking your truth, whatever it is. I'll just speak to what we do in SG. We officially have 3 people, or up to 3 people, that have the static rep role, and this is to designate that you have the ability to drop food for your team, and you can collaborate with leaders from other teams and those sorts of things. But we really push that every single person is involved in the success of the static. And the reason we push that is because every single person also has an impact on the destruction and despair and static.
Oh,
And it's really important that everybody is involved and that all of the pressure isn't on a select few people. Because if it's on a select few people, then what I've seen time and time again is those people eventually go, you know what? I have a lot going on IRL right now. I am so burnt out. I just need some time. And their team is like, nope, you're the leader. We're not going to do anything. And then they go, all right, well, I got to drop then because I can't keep going at this pace. And then the team completely dissolves because 7 or 8 people weren't interested in taking any initiative. So for me, a lot of this stuff comes down to how bad do you really want it? Like, do you want to be on a team, or do you want to be? Because if you want to be on a team, then you're naturally a teammate. You're a part of the team, which means that you contribute and you have a little bit of self-sacrifice and those sorts of things for the good of the team, the good of the collective. But if you're not really interested in being on a team, then you're a spectator in the stands watching the team play. So it's a bit of a problem because a lot of times we see people that are like, well, you know, I want to be a part of the team, but I don't really want to do anything for the team. I want to be the spectator, but get all of the reward and all of the benefit of being on the team. And that's when the team kind of falls apart, because everyone's not really bought in to that idea. So if you're thinking, man, I don't know if I can lead, I don't know if I can put the tag up. Well, I don't think anyone really feels like they're the most capable or the best leader or anything. I think everybody has vulnerabilities and insecurities. You just have to be willing to say, hey, yeah, I'm imperfect, but doing this imperfectly is better than not doing it at all.
How
I agree.
dare you? I am perfect. How could you say otherwise? Oh my God.
Oh
Sneb
my
talks.
God.
Oh my God. I'm just
Sneb and Emmy again. Round what? 5, 6?
No,
I
I
actually
Building-
want to bring
Go
this
ahead.
to raiding. Back now on the topic of raiding actually, and this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, and I actually can't wait to open this up because raid selling, okay, is one of the most controversial ways of making money in this game. And in fact, any form of carrying or stuff like that is going to get a lot of backlash. But raid selling, I don't know who if here except Emmy has engaged with it, but I guess this is more of a question, I guess, to you, Emmy. But if anyone else chime in as well, how do you guys feel about the mentality of selling such a service that you take someone, carry them, and then get them done, and then whatever you get paid, whatever gold or ectos or MCs in that amount. And also, is it actually worth the time to raid sell, or is it more of like I can do it, so I might as well make money out of it kind of perspective?
If I can, real quick, to interject and actually sidetrack us back to what Sneb was saying, because I think I have something kind of important that I want to say. In the kind of discussion of leadership, putting up your commander tag before we go into raid selling, don't just look at us as, 4 internet personalities, 4 people who are putting ourselves up on Twitch, who are saying, yeah, guys, it's not easy to lead, but go ahead and just do it. Obviously, we are very differently minded on this. But to know me from my background, if I can get vulnerable for a second here, I'm literally autistic. I have been to speech therapy for many years when I was growing up. In high school, I couldn't give a book report in a history class or something like that without completely breaking down, sweating, without stuttering on every single word. Leadership is something very, very hard to do. If you can find people who are kind of a comfortable group for you to kind of all of you kind of rely upon each other, that is the best way to get into it first. I don't think any of us probably selected okay, I'm going to lead my own raid team. None of us were probably like that at first, but we probably are just kind of people that fell into it. If you just give yourself the chance, if say okay, you've never led anything before, give yourself the chance to be vulnerable with a team that is worth your time, that is having the same goals as you, that can each of you set up the same expectations. It is one of the best experiences in gaming. Just like how we had our blind group with a lot of people that we were friends with. It was one of my best experiences I've had, not just in Guild Wars 2, but in gaming throughout the entirety of my life. That's what I wanted to say. We can go into race selling. Sorry.
No,
No, I
I'll chime in
appreciate that.
onto that first as
Yeah.
well. I completely agree because I know nowadays I do a lot of commanding, right? And I like to think that I know myself pretty well. I'm pretty charismatic when it comes to that stuff too. But when I first started raiding, I was very much taken under the wing of an existing guild, right? It's like, when I first started raiding, I had no idea. I thought Chill Shout Reaper farming Lake Doric Leather Farm was like the hot shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I thought I was doing so much damage. And then I downloaded Arc DPS and I was like, oh my God, I'm doing 1,000 damage per second. And everybody else is doing like 30K plus. I'm freaking trash, right? So it's like, I was taken under the wing of another guild. And how did I meet this guild? It was actually just a very, very casual conversation. I remember very clearly I was just doing a dungeon and I had on my character's fashion, which I was pretty proud about. And another person in the dungeon was like, hey, I have a character that looks really similar to yours. And we kind of just like struck up a conversation, and that person ended up being Ari. So knows Ari. I don't know if you guys know Ari, but he was the one who actually introduced me to a lot of like the end game things. He introduced me to TP flipping. It was actually, he basically facilitated my very first trade like ever, right? So it's like a lot of that just came down to just kind of interacting with the community at large, and like Reed said, kind of making yourself vulnerable, right? Like I was like, we were chatting and I told him like, yeah, I've never done a raid before. I've like never done an MMO raid of any sort before, and that guild took me under their wing, and that's kind of how I got started here. So it's like everybody has humble roots.
I want to say like it also isn't. It doesn't even have to be specific to like like running like something in the game. It could even be like the community. That you maybe have an idea and you're like, I don't know if I'm the right person for this, but it's either you go out there and put it out, or it's gonna be like I don't know, could it have actually worked out or not, right? Kind of question. It's like the what if. And yeah, there's honestly, and even in a lot of games and stuff, there's people passionate about certain different things of communities. Like I know, for example, there's a few examples I can bring. Like for example, Willow from like the Griffin community. For those who don't know, Willow's a Griffin enjoyer. Like they actually do stunts with their Griffin mounts. They like do courses, races. But she wasn't. It wasn't a community at first. She had found someone who was also passionate about the same thing, and liked the ideas of what they were doing. And then at some point they were like, I do want to do my own flavor on it, right? And she ended up setting up that community, but it took a while for her to kind of like get that initiative. But now look at her. Like the last thing you could remember her for is like literally a month ago she showcased a map for Secrets of the Obscure with her Griffin. Like, and I don't even think that could have happened if she hadn't taken that step. Likewise, I know another friend of mine, Kenny. He's from like United Arts of Tyria. They're like an art sort of Discord where they do like art stuff for Guild Wars 2, jumping puzzles, Griffin races, also the Griffin and Beetle races, fashion shows. They're very much like on the art form kind of content. And he was nervous to actually even create the idea of like a Discord called United Arts of Tyria. And he found other players who were also passionate, and to be fair, like it was a team effort. Him and multiple people like carried to get that Discord up and running. And now they've got a community. They're like almost 4,000 people in that Discord. And if he didn't actually have the initiative to go like, I'm gonna do it, hey, maybe we'd be missed out on like a really cool community at this point in the game. So whatever it is, find people, or if you are in a group of people and it just takes that one push, like a one person to say I'm gonna do it, and then someone's gonna jump along. And sometimes it's fine if you need to just figure it out, or be under someone's wing, or be in a group of people, and then just see how it goes before you push in. I think everybody can take the steps at the pace that they want to take them. But it's definitely like a whole different sort of breath when you actually do take that step, right? Like if you've opened like something that you might have never thought was possible. So, all right, on to the topic of raid selling.
I'll kind of first say I want to hear you guys' thoughts on it first, because I obviously have a lot of thoughts on it, but I want to hear you guys' unbiased opinion first.
Mm-hmm. Sneb, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think my perspective on it over time has evolved. This is where I stand now. I don't think it matters very much. Like if you want to sell, you should sell. I think it's a good way to make gold. Just like in Guild Wars 1, there used to be runners, so people would get you from place to place. There are people that do that in Guild Wars too, though it's maybe not quite as common, where they'll say, hey, I'll give you a tour on my turtle. I'll give you all the
Yes.
waypoints of certain maps and, you know, those kind of things. Or they'll go, there's different tiers of this, obviously, but there's people right now, a bunch of people that are at the various jumping puzzles that can give you astral claim, like the weeklies and whatever. And they're just like, hey, chuck me a tip if you want for waypointing to friends. So they just park a character there. So that's a service. I think raid selling is exactly the same thing. I think where people get frustrated with raid selling is they think it's their only option. And so they look at the LFG and they say, okay, well, there's only people selling raids. So clearly the community is super gatekeepy because I can't even play this content unless I buy it from someone. Which makes sense because perception is everything. That's the only thing that matters. And the perception that people have, especially if you're not super plugged into maybe the streaming community or the content creation community or any of the discords or whatever, if you're not plugged into that, all you see, the only advertisement for groups sometimes would be sellers.
Mhm.
So selling is a super positive thing. There's also people that legitimately it's the only way they could get that legendary armor or the achievements or whatever because they're really busy IRL, and so they have the gold or the resources, and that's just what they want to do. And I think that's fair enough. I think the counter to that is that it does devalue some of those achievements slightly, which whatever. I would say that the biggest thing about raid selling though is definitely that perception. People just feel like there's no other option, there's nothing that they can do, and thus they perhaps hate raid sellers quite a bit. People also seem to not like that people are allowed to advertise those services on the LFG. We could go down a massive rabbit hole with that, but the reality, and it's going to be one of those trust me bro moments, I guess, but I've looked into it. It is completely against the rules. In fact, or it's completely within the rules. It is not against the rules. They explicitly name raid selling and say that it is okay to raid sell using the LFG. So everyone that complains about it, you're totally entitled to your opinion, but it doesn't matter because it's explicitly allowed. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Sneb,
I guess that's my take. I've never raid sold. I don't really plan on raid selling, and the reason I've never raid sold is not because I can't do it. I could probably do it. I just don't do it because I have a community that's dedicated to helping people get in. And I think that if I raid sold, the perception would be that I'm basically advertising that service to people. And I'm not interested in that kind of what's the word? The vitriol that would come from that. It's not worth it to me. I also don't really need the gold, so I don't really care. I've probably done hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000+ trainings. I've given my gold to get people their gear, whether it's Ascended or Exotic or whatever. I've spent hours helping people do other stuff. I don't need a raid sell. I just do it because it's fun, you know.
Yeah,
Okay, Reed, what's your
I talked to Sneb a little bit about this, like with him advertising his guild and LFG and things like that. And I know there aren't any better options in the LFG, but I 100% think that seeing raid sellers in the LFG is super demoralizing for anyone putting up a group for the first time or trying to find a group. And I wish it would change. That's my take on that little bit there. Of course, there's more nuance to it, of course. However, when it comes to raid selling, I have always been a part of other games like top 1% of raiders. To me, raid selling is just a service, right? I've even been offered by one of the oldest raid selling guilds in Final Fantasy to come join them, sell like top, sell DSR, these ultimates, things like that, which I would make a lot of money off of. I've never done it because I do think, how do I want to put this? I'm not a fan of it. I hate that raid selling exists, but I've come to the point to where I know if there's a content coming out, no matter what the rewards are, even if it's just a title that says like, uh, I killed this boss, Yahoo! Or even like put it next to your name, like you've only killed it X amount of times, people would always buy it, no matter what. If there's some type of reward, people will buy it. People are lazy. And I love whenever people buy it and then come back through later and try to get their own clear. I've seen that in Final Fantasy as well. And I've just come to accept it, like Sneb said. It's a reality that you have to come to terms with. It's never going to truly improve. It's as more content comes out, it's only going to get worse.
Fair, yeah.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing to my perspective that's I think pretty important, because I'm pretty sure that Emmy's going to want to address this one. The one thing that really bothers me about raid selling is that people value just straight up buying the thing more than they value being trained in it. And so much so that the expectation in the Guild Wars 2 community is that a guild or content creator or someone, some random person, they are obligated to train you for free and get nothing. And there's no tipping culture. They're not allowed to ask for anything, nothing. Yet those same people go, man, you are not allowed to raid sell. Raid selling is so evil, but you must train me on this for free. You must spend your free time doing this. It is a really weird problem, because in my mind, we should create a culture where those who are willing to put in that time to train other people, who can then go train more people, who can train more people, who can train more people, a sustainable thing here. We should reward that. We should say, hey, like, let me toss you the 2 gold I earned, which isn't even your total rewards, by the way. Let me toss you the 2 gold we earned from killing Veil Guardian as a thank you. You know, because that trainer probably already got their clear. They're getting literally nothing from doing this. And that's why so many people don't do it, is because there's no culture of supporting the people who do that. And I just find that very strange, right? Very, very strange. I would much rather pay someone to teach me how to do something so that I can then go do it sustainably forever than pay a massive premium to someone to just do it for me every time.
Actually insane. I'll get more money being tipped for helping people with a jumping puzzle than I will for training in a raid. That's actually incredible.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
I mean, Emmy made a killing off of her Heart of Thorns trains. It's a lot, but you know the thing is, and this is you know, before Emmy, because I know I see you got a lot you want to jump in on as well. We actually recently in Overflow introduced a review system for raid sellers, so that people could actually review the experience more or less. It was like a requested thing. Even before we introduced that, like even months before that, we also added like a requirement on Overflow. If you want to advertise your raids, you have to have your prices posted. And we actually got a lot of like complaints, not from the NA, but the EU raid sellers, because apparently on EU, there is a lot of undercutting that happens, and the prices are very different. Like on NA, everybody sells at a high caliber, high price. Not many people care if like there's a guild that sells it a bit cheaper than them. But on EU, it's very much a undercutting sort of like, you know, freebie frenzy over there. To the point where, yeah, a lot of complaints came with like, you know, pricings and everything like that. So like, I guess the question is to you, Emmy, right? Like, how did you guys even figure out like what is really, you know, worth the time to sell the raid? Like most customers, I'd imagine, are people who, I mean, to be honest, like are people who probably just buy the gold in the game and then just send it to the raid sellers, right? People who don't just have time to get into the raid, so they might as well just do it because they will never be able to dedicate the time for it. How does all of that stuff like come into play with like a team?
So honestly, I have like in my head, I'm kind of almost like planning the whole spiel. So let me maybe first start with a disclaimer, just in case there's anyone new hopping in here, or if they skipped ahead in like the YouTube video, that sort of thing. I'm not advertising anything. If anything, I'm a retired raid seller. I don't really do it anymore. I did it a lot back in the day. Nowadays, I'm just saying this just so people kind of know what's going on, shedding some light on it, giving it some transparency, that sort of thing. So if you have any other questions on things that I haven't addressed, feel free to comment or whatever it's called. So first thing I kind of want to set down is kind of like, what exactly is raid selling, right? So biggest and the most common package that people try to buy is a set of Envoy armor. And to get your first set of Envoy armor, you need 150 Li in addition to the Envoy 1 and 2 achievements. Both Envoy 1 and 2 can be completed in the 6 weeks that it takes, because every week when you full clear, that's 25 legendary insights from each of the bosses. So 150 divided by 25, that's 6 weeks. So in that 6 weeks, you can get all of like the spirit strings and like the spirit weave, whatever it's called. You can get all of the time gated materials and all that kind of stuff. So usually that's kind of sold as a package. The price of this package, currently to my knowledge on NA, is hovers around 1,300 gold per full clear. So what you're essentially doing is you're paying 1.3k gold for usually, I think most guilds hover around 2 to 3 hours for a full clear. And in addition to that, typically the guilds are doing multiple people at the same time, right? So it's like you're usually not just selling to one person at a time. I think most guilds that I know of usually do 2 or 3 people at the same time, depending on the difficulty of like the encounter stuff. So some people will only do 7 people, right? So it's low manning with 7 people for wings 1 through 4, and then they might do 8 people for 5 through 7 or something like that. There's a lot of like kind of different ways to tackle it. So that means napkin calculation. If you have, let's say, like, let's just say be conservative, you have 2 buyers at one time, that's 2,600 gold, and you're splitting that amongst 8 people. You're getting 325 gold for essentially a 2 to 3 hour run, right? And that basically totals up to about 100 to 150 gold an hour, which far eclipses any amount of like gold farming that you can do in the game, right? So it is undeniably a lot of money. And you kind of ask, like, how do people kind of like set the price on this? I'll be honest, I wasn't here when it first started, but my kind of understanding with it is almost mirrored off of a real-time minimum wage job, if that makes any sense, right? Because for a lot of these people, when let me maybe like set another thing here is that a lot of the people that purchase raids have zero interest in actually rating themselves. Like a lot of these people, I think the best way to kind of describe it is it's almost just another gem store item to them, right? It's like they just want the convenience of being able to change their stats, change their fashion, all that kind of stuff. But you can't buy it in the gem store, so they just swipe the credit card and then buy it from the raid sellers instead. And this obviously directly profits ArenaNet because you have people spending money on the game to buy the gems to convert to gold. And then I mean I don't have any evidence of this, but I'm pretty sure that's why they are happy to turn a blind eye. Because again, if you're assuming that you have, let me like maybe talk about when I sold at my peak, I was selling pretty much 6 days out of 7, and every single time we had at least 2 or 3 buyers. So that's at least 15 people per week that are spending $100 every single week, right? So that's a lot of money for Arena. So yeah, anyways, that's kind of like all contextual knowledge and stuff. So these people, when they swipe the credit card, buy it, and treat it as a gem store item, they don't really have any interest in rating as a whole. So I would say that kind of like the target demographic that Sneb was referring to earlier, right? Is like you have people that would be willing to pay for somebody to train them. I think these are very different people from the people that are just trying to pay so they can get it once, in and out, 20-minute adventure, and then they're just kind of done, right? They have their item, now they can go back to playing open world, change their fashion whenever they want. So
Yeah, I think
yeah.
the problem with
Mhm.
that is that those two very different people, how do I explain this? The one that looks at it and goes, "Wow, this is really unfair." Um, they don't even think about the fact that the other person isn't at all bothered by this, right?
Yeah.
They like
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just happy to pay because I wouldn't do this otherwise. It's not for me." But the but the other person is like, "I would really like to try this, but I perceive the only way to try this as to buy my way into a group,
Yeah,
and that's
definitely. I mean, I
unfair."
definitely think that there's a bit of a perception thing here. And if I'm gonna be completely honest, I actually never really thought about it, if that makes any sense. Like when I first started reselling, it wasn't because I wanted the gold. It's actually just because a friend needed a fill for her group. And she knew that I knew how to do all of the raids, and she knew that I was happy to like help out. So that's kind of how I slowly started getting into it. I actually didn't go into it for personal gain, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
But
How long ago
yeah.
was that, Emmy?
Um 4 years ago, I want to say. About 4 years
I would
ago.
argue that 4 years ago, it was quite different too, right? Because I think it was much
Mhm.
easier to pug then. I mean, has it ever been really easy to pug? Maybe not, but 4 years ago, I think there were more groups on the LFG. So while people might still not have liked it, I think now the attitude has probably shifted even further. And again, I'm just going out on a limb here.
Mhm.
I would argue that it probably has, only because there are fewer and fewer groups on the LFG. And that doesn't mean people aren't raiding. It means that they're probably going to different Discord groups and guilds and whatever to do it. But if you think about the kind of person that jumps in, they look in the LFG, all they see are the sellers. That's they're going to sort of project their frustration with not being able to find a group or do the content on what they see presently there, which are the sellers.
Yeah, I mean, honest, I completely agree. Like I said, to be completely honest, I didn't really think about it that much. I just ran raids with. To me, it was just I was running raids with people, right? So it's like I do completely agree. I do think there is this kind of warped perception with it. Something that I have noticed though is actually the demand for raid sellers has gone down a lot. This is again very much anecdotal, and actually, okay, let me add in an additional piece of context here. So was kind of referencing like how, especially with all the EU people, there's a lot of undercutting and stuff. This is gonna sound really scummy, but it's not like super intentional. But a lot of the raid sellers know each other, right? Like a lot of the raid selling guilds know of each other. So like GG on NA knows KA, which knows KP, which knows like Gar's group and everything, like SNR and that sort of. I forget their official guild tag for selling. So it's like a lot of them kind of know each other. So because of that, they kind of like talk amongst themselves, and then they basically decide on like a fixed price, right? So that's kind of like why I think at least on NA, the price undercutting is not as cutthroat as I guess, like for example with EU, like there is a little bit of coordination involved with it. And like I said, it very much mirrors almost the amount of money that you would get with a minimum wage job, right? Like if you go through and you calculate if you had converted the gems to gold or that sort of thing, it actually lines up pretty well. I think it's about $10 to $15 an hour or something like that. So
They're price fixing. That's like illegal.
Yeah, they got a union, to be honest. Yeah, NA has a rate selling union.
I feel like it makes it sound a lot less charitable than what it actually is. I think it's just a price that people have settled on, and like they don't really see any reason to like lower or raise the price. That's
well, the reason that you'd lower the price is because you have a free market economy where people are undercutting is probably healthy.
Yeah, I mean,
how is the NA raid selling more like socialized and unionized than the EU? That's actually incredible.
I mean, okay. I feel like this very much sounds as like a real myth. It's just a lot of people are just friends with each other, right? So you just like kind of like talk to each other. It's not like we're saying, haha, screw all these people. We want to take their money as much as we possibly can, and that sort of stuff. And another thing I wanted to chime in here, and it was the original reason why I brought this up, is that raid selling guilds, there's actually not as many of them anymore, if you can believe it. Like I remember back in the day, I remember DP did a decent amount of selling. There were like a handful of other guilds that like tried to pop up and do selling. And I think that's actually because the demand for legendary armor back then, specifically through raiding, was a lot higher. And I would actually, again, this is very much anecdotal. I don't really have that much evidence to support this, but back then I actually do think it was pretty hard to get into raids. There's a lot more community resources that are available now. So Heartstock only popped up in the past 2 to 3 years. There's a lot of raid training discords that have popped up in the past 2 to 3 years. There's a lot of content creators that have popped up in the past 2 to 3 years. Like Sneb, you're literally an example of this. Reed, you're another example. I like to think I'm another example. Kiyoshi's an example. Enko's an example. So there's a lot of content creators that also started to fill that demand. And because of that, I feel like the overall demand for raid sellers have gone down. Like I know actually quite a few of the guilds that kind of like stopped selling after a while. It's because they weren't getting more than 1 to 2 people per week. Right. And it's like at that point, like you're literally just doing a full clear like once every week. It's not really that much money compared to, again, like when I was at my peak, I was doing 6 days a week with 2 to 3 clients every single time.
Yeah,
So,
I think even in 2015, 2016, I think it was probably its peak. And I think that even ran up until like even probably 2019. I think like Icebrute Saga days is where I think this sort of thing slowly was like basically trying to slowly coming back down on a decline. Like it started at around 2019. And I do agree, some of this is to do with the resources out there. Because even the Discords, like back then, I think back then only RA and Snowcrows helped, like a public Discord was a thing. I don't remember if maybe Cross-Oaths came in also in those years, but though they weren't as big as they were now. But then certainly in the pandemic, like they pretty much, because everyone was just sitting now and playing and stuff, and it kind of just, right, all these communities finally like got more people because people were actually bored, actually searching for things on Discord. So people actually went out of their way to like, all right, well, I'm playing the game. I need to find people to play with, do stuff with, and like the content that they're trying to do. So it's interesting to me that NA actually like definitely sort of, came to a conclusion of like, all right, we'll not step too much on each other's, because we had like a lot of complaints from EU raid sellers saying if you, and this is, I'm not going to say the guild, but certainly there was a specific EU guild that we were told that basically all they do is undercut the point where it's not even worth selling the raid. Like yeah, they should just undercut the whole market. And like, look, it's our Discord, it's our rules. Fair is fair. The price has to be posted. If people want to choose to go to like a guild who can, you know, it will take them maybe 6 tries versus a guild that will take them in 1 clear, right? It's on the customer. But like, we needed like a bit of transparency, more or less, like for people to like actually know like what they're gonna buy into. But
No, honestly,
yeah.
I was gonna say I think the fact that you guys made the prices available was very good for people. I think sometimes there is a bit of mysticism around a lot of it, and a lot of that is actually intentional, right? It's like people want this to seem like, oh, this is like this excellent service that we're selling and all that kind of stuff. But kind of like by having the price tag actually there, now people can make an informed decision, right? So I think for the consumer side of things, that's very, very good for the consumer. It's not that great for the sellers, but it's great for the consumer.
Yeah.
And I think that is honestly what is like what is most important there. And I feel like actually almost indirectly, again, this is just my own observations, since TP overflow, because TP overflow has a massive influence on just in general like the gold making scene in Gilris too. It is probably like the authority to go to, right? In a way, since you guys have almost legitimized it, I guess maybe that's like a word to say it, right? It's like now it's like there, people can see it, people can see the prices. It's become a little bit more normalized, I think, almost to like talk about raid selling. Whereas I think back in the day it was very much taboo, right? It was kind of like the sellers kind of kept to their own circles. They only really talked amongst themselves. They had clients. It was very like hush hush kind of thing, right? And nowadays I feel like it kind of comes up in casual conversation pretty frequently. It's just kind of like oh, that's like another guild that's doing a thing, which I think I would actually I say that ironically it makes it the perception that Sneb was saying. I think it actually makes it a little bit better because when people like just in general talk about it and you hear people say things like, oh, these sellers, like, you know, they're just catering towards like a market that doesn't really want to do raids and that sort of thing. And then actually I would say, again, this is bad for the sellers, it's great for the consumer. A lot of people will then say, yeah, it's not worth your time, right? Like, it's not worth your time to specifically farm the gold so that you can go and buy the rates, right? There's very much like a transparency there that now, okay, the people that are buying the service are usually doing some sort of gems to gold conversion. So what that means then is for the people that are rating, then now they realize, okay, well, that 1,000 gold that I could have put into for getting just a single like wing or a single wing 1 through 7 clear in 1 week, I could invest that into 2 sets of ascended armor, right? Like 1,000 gold is more than enough to buy and craft 2 sets of full ascended gear, which is enough to gear both a healer and a DPS role, right? It's like at that point, then yeah, your time investment actually is worth going into the raid yourself if you genuinely have an interest in raiding, which I find is very interesting, right? It's like you would think it would be the other way around, but
Yeah, I think there was a
yeah.
craze a few times here and there where people were like specifically trying to raid to actually become a seller in a guild, right? And there's even trials for it. Like there was even like proper like solo this or run with the group once or twice, like, and they test you to see if you're like on par with them. Yeah, like it was like an interview. Like if you were trying to be a raid seller, trying to get into like a guild, and there's a lot of these around with very strict requirements, or even to the point where some of them were like, it has to be a referral from within the guild to get you in the guild, to even get you the idea of like trial for the guild, right? Like it's not even guaranteed. First, you need to know someone in the guild, and then you need to be tested with a few runs with the guild, and then they'll see if you're fit to actually raid sell. And
yeah, that's right on the money.
Yeah,
actually.
and it can even get a little bit like I guess what's the right word? I'd say jealousy, because like you coming in is possibly taking someone else's spot at some point, right? And there's definitely it's up to the raid leader to like basically plan, all right, you're on this night, you're on that seller, you're on that client, like, and kind of make sure everybody's at least getting 1 or 2 fills a week. But it started this insane mentality between raiders even, like, and I've seen it because of like, yeah, like a few of my friends were you probably know some of them as well, like Ari of course is one. And it definitely kind of had these kind of mentalities where Even within sellers, like they're afraid to take on someone else in the guild because it could be someone's spot off at some point. But I think it's normalized now in Overflow because there's the sense of like it's like a billboard, right? I like to sometimes refer to the services channel in our Discord as like a billboard. You can just advertise your services, and I think it really picked up when a different Ari Echo, not the same Ari. We're talking about a different Ari. He doesn't play Guild Wars 2, but I feel like it definitely got put into notice when we had like commanders in World vs. World setting shared participation. And yeah, I don't know if you guys, I don't know if you guys know this, by the way, but you can actually get the shared participation even if you're not on the same region, as in the commander is in EU and you're on NA, but you're still getting the participation. It's something with the squad system. I don't think. Yeah.
So do you just have to be in World versus World somewhere?
Yeah. As long as you basically are active and attack something, you'll get the pips and the stuff like the reward track. So people were selling the service of commander participation for gift of battles because people didn't want to spend a few hours in World versus World. So literally, and people AFK, they literally, yeah. And that probably brought in a lot of raiders thinking like we could just do the same thing with raids. And there's been a few other services. It's funny enough, some services has spawned in relation to the Discord, like people who are lazy to do it. Like in Discord, in Overflow, if you trade on the Discord, you can build like your reputation. And then you can get ranked, like if you've traded 5,000 gold in value or 10,000 gold worth of trades or 25,000 gold worth of trades. You could pile up all your trades. Granted, you've actually had the posts and the reviews to back them up. People were lazy to put that in an Excel sheet. So there were people charging people the service of let me do your trade reputation sheet for you so that you could get ranked up. So it kind of became this thing where, you know, sort of different kind of charges came through. And even we had an instance with art selling, like people would sell art for gold or materials in the game. And I think that even spawned at some point. I actually had to get an answer from someone from ArenaNet to actually comment, is this actually allowed or not? Which they said it's fine. But it was, it's invited a lot of this behavior. Raid sellers, I honestly can't fault them. They saw the opportunity and they're like, it makes absolute sense, right? So like you said, I mean, it was secret back then. You had to kind of know someone to sell it, to buy it from. It's like now everybody's just like, no shame. Like, yeah, I'm selling it. And that's it, really.
I think the aspect of taboo is very interesting in this game because I come from WoW, I come from Final Fantasy, and in Final Fantasy especially, like, raid selling is very taboo. And that's mostly because whenever you're talking about raid selling, you're not talking about their in-game currency. You're not talking about gil. You're talking about actual dollars, euros, whatever your exchange rate currency may be. Has there been much of a problem or case of that in Guild Wars 2 at all? It seems to me, at least now, a lot of raid selling, a lot of services, since you can convert gems to gold, vice versa, a lot of it seems to be just gold based, right?
In my experience, it's always gold based because it's the easiest way to distribute gold to the other members of the team, right? It's like it's not like the commander is getting the money. Like, you know, you slide $20 under the table, they'll elo boost you or something like that. You know, it's like it's not like that, right? It's like the money has to be shared equally, usually amongst the other members of the team. And the easiest way to do that is through gold. So like I'm pretty sure that this is how most guilds do it. This is at least how my guild did it, right? It's like you would accept raw gold from the buyer because raw gold is easiest, right? They
Yep.
buy gems, convert it to gold, then they mail it. And then oftentimes the sellers will have different accounts, right? So like even speaking for myself, I actually have 3 accounts that I actually play on quite regularly. Like they're not even just like side accounts. I actually play on them. So that means per week I can take 1.5k gold without hitting the gold limit, right? Because you can't take more than 500 gold per week. So then if every seller has that, right? Some people literally have like 10 or 20 accounts, that sort of thing. Then you can then pull those resources. You can buy based off of like the exchange rates. You can buy it from OTC, you can buy it from the trading post. If you just have like your own stores of like mystic coins or ecto or whatever other material that you kind of accumulated over time, then it's very easy to split that, right? Because then you can just use the guild bank. You can just put the money in there and then calculate the total amount, divide that by 8, and then distribute that to everyone. And you don't have to deal with mail cap then, because if everybody has permissions in the guild, you can just take it out. So it's like, in my experience, it just makes sense to use in-game materials because there are in-game systems that facilitate that. As opposed to, like, for example, if you Venmoed someone or something like that using friends and family, or like if somebody uses the wrong one and puts it under a business tax, then do you have to pay taxes on it? Is this a job? Right? So it's like, I don't know.
Keep it a little bit under the table.
Yeah, like I can't speak for other games, but that's just
Yeah, keep
been
keep
my
it within the game, right? Like
Yeah.
getting me something in the game, I give you something in the game, right? And that actually solves a lot of like the legalities, right? If you will, like TOS, RMT, because certainly if you were to, exchange the money service, then you're now falling under real money trading, right? But if the person is, I'm gonna buy the gems, so they've gone through the game system and distributed the gold from those, like changed the gems to gold and then distribute the gold to them. It's within the game system. It's technically someone bought stuff in the game, so you've basically contributed to the company. And this is why Ain't would allow something like this, is because it's within their game system, right? It's not like right. So it's very much the same as someone porting you to a jumping puzzle or stuff like that, right? This just happens to be a group of raiders are gonna run you through the course and get it for you, and whatever you need from it.
Yeah, because it was very interesting to hear that, like, ArenaNet is completely fine with you posting it on the LFG. That is not something I'm very used to. Most of the time, whenever you see raid sellers on WoW or Final Fantasy, a lot of times they're actually fake. Sometimes you might see like someone saying like, "Oh yeah, Method or Echo raid selling." In reality, that's a scam. Echo and Method don't really post their raid selling on LFG because it's bannable. It's very,
Wait, is
very
it
interesting.
bannable in WoW? Really?
Yeah. Especially if you're posting
Even for
in the
in-game
LFG.
currency?
You can't post it in the LFG where other raids would typically go.
Okay.
In-game currency, it's fine to do raid selling. However, that's not the common case.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that a lot of the dynamics in WoW have kind of shifted in the last, since the Race to World first started being streamed, the dynamics have sort of shifted because a lot of these guilds, these top, 0.0001 percentile guilds, they were the top raid sellers, right? And now they're under a lot more scrutiny where they're even in direct contact with Blizzard and constantly saying, okay, this is how much gold we're making off of raid selling. This is what we're doing here. This is where the X is coming from, right? And this is through Discord, this is through other means. They pretty much are auditing themselves before the company. And it's very, very interesting to see like how different the culture is here. It used to be a lot of RMT in WoW. Now there's a lot of RMT in Final Fantasy still, because obviously not most NA people, especially, or EU, aren't really in contact with Square Enix too much. But the dynamics are interesting.
Yeah, it's no, certainly I didn't know that. I thought it was within that same realm of like it's within the game. So it's interesting that like in WoW, actually I would have thought something like that would have been even more accepted than it is in Guild Wars 2. Because
it's fine to be paid to do raids if it's in gold. But if it's through RMT, that is bannable. If you're posting it in the LFG and like you're making it, especially if you're linking it to RMT, extremely bannable. Especially for the top guilds, you were audited heavily.
Yeah, I'd expect it. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna kind of chime in, especially on like the LFG thing. So usually I'm kind of like in defense of ANET because I know that like messing with core systems is the recipe for disaster, right? Like they literally like adjusted a fractal boss's health and like broke the fractals, right? So it's like, that being said though, they have shown that they can modify the LFG, at least the tabs in there pretty easily, right? Because like every new expansion or new living world that comes out, they add a new tab. And fairly recently, like in the last 2 to 3 years or so, they updated the raids tab so that there was like the training versus experience, or strike missions training versus experience. It does kind of make me wonder if they should have just like a guild advertisement tab, right? It's like, honestly, if they had that, I wonder if that would, I mean, not even wonder, I imagine it would definitely shift the perception, right? Because then like to find active groups that are about to run right then and there, that's one tab for people. And then there's another one for guild recruitment, whether that's for selling guilds, or if you're like a static that's recruiting people, or if you're like whatever it's called, like
Yeah.
that might be a good alternative. But I will
Yo, I'm gonna
say
go
that
hard here for you. I'm just gonna say it.
Oh,
The
he's gonna cook.
LFG is utter garbage and needs to be completely redone and modernized because it does not accomplish what it needs to accomplish right
yeah,
now.
I mean, I
It
do
is
agree.
way too difficult for people to get groups, and that really inhibits people from enjoying the game to the fullest. Boom, there it is.
100%.
Yeah, I
And the
agree.
big
I
thing
will.
here too is we talked about the Final Fantasy LFG a little bit too. Sorry to cut you off, Emmy. I wanted to riff
Yeah,
off
yeah,
of
you go.
Sneb here. It's whenever you look at like an LFG like Final Fantasy, you can oftentimes see on the side tab here, like, oh, before you even click on one of the many tabs, it's like, oh, here is rating, here's this. You can just see what people are doing. So if you don't have an idea of what you want to do, but you want to do something with a group, you can just head into it almost immediately. Very little kind of wall to entry. The same thing that we're kind of talking about accessibility with just like a click of the button for a raid finder or something like that. They need to make it to where their LFG is less of a wall. So much of this game has quality group content, and it's so hard to find.
Yeah.
I wanted to chime in here because I wasn't playing the game when this was the case, but I know that on Guild Wars 2 release, right? They didn't even have an LFG in the game, right? Didn't you have to literally go to another
Yep.
website and then you had to like refresh it over and over again or something to find a group? So to me, that kind of hints that, okay, this LFG system, obviously it's a core system now, but they have modified it pretty heavily in the past. So I feel like at least like development wise, right? Like just developer bandwidth wise, I wonder if it's possible, right? Like if it were any other game, like if let's say like LFG was baked into the game on release, me as I would kind of shy away. I'd be like, that is a core system that's been there. You've messed with that. There's gonna be duct tape that's falling off everywhere. But they have modified it in the past. So it makes me wonder if they could do it again. And then yeah, the other thing that I was gonna kind of chime in here is I know that having that request, what Reed mentioned, it's like you just have a list of all available groups that are running at any time, so you can like just see what's going on. I know that that's actually very highly requested. Sneb probably knows this as well. I know at least in the partner program, a lot of people have requested that feature, but obviously, like they can't really say whether or not they are going to do it. So no update on that.
Yeah,
But
I think it's a big proponent of getting like, you know, engagement within the game system, right? Because so much of it right now, and honestly, we are in the point where it's less of that in this day and age. Right, you have things like Discord, people still use like maybe TeamSpeak and whatever it is, like you get into groups with. So it's almost, it's gonna happen, right? Like people will always find ways to form groups outside of a game. However, it definitely adds a huge benefit to at least have that function there in the game. Whether people choose to engage with it or not, it's a different case. But just to have it there, it adds that visibility because, and I think this is somewhat like things that I think we kind of miss sometimes when we play stuff like this. It's like, yeah, we obviously know where to go and find a group. Like if I want to go find a Discord for Raiders, I'm gonna start maybe with Raiders Academy or Crossroads Inn. I'm going to go to the Guild Wars 2 recruitment Reddit page and find the guilds that maybe specifically advert. Like, there's multiple avenues, right? Or ask around my friends or people who know raiding communities. However, we sometimes feel like that is supposed to be intuitive and you're supposed to know that 100% when there's people who are like, no, I mean, I'm lost. Where do I find these groups? Where do I even begin? And I do think, yeah, having something in place in the system, and this is why I would love if they change something in the guild tab. I would love a tab that is just purely for guild advertising, and you can then filter it within the stuff that you want to do. Right? You want to filter for raid, you want to filter for World vs World guilds, PvP, whatever it is, but like a system there where people at least can go and find the groups of people they want to play with, and then similarly implement that onto like sort of LFG. Like I don't know if a group finder similar or like a dungeon finder like in WoW would be exactly how you would replicate it. But you know, when I was like right now I'm playing WoW retail with a friend, and it's so easy to just get into a raid in WoW. Like, and you don't even need to raid or even a dungeon. Like it's super easy. Just click on it, whatever your role is, and then within like 2 minutes. I'm in with a bunch of strangers. I have no idea who it is. Granted, it's a lot of chaos because you just have people who like speed run through everything, just kill everything. So you're not really learning the dungeon.
No.
But if you want to go in there just to get stuff because you need to level up and stuff, it's super easy. And you kind of get like a taste of what content you're going to be doing. If you choose to do it at a higher level, then you at least have that idea of what you're going to expect, right? The issue I think with Guild Wars 2 raids is that our normal mode it's kind of a step more difficult than like pugging on the dungeon finder in WoW. I think that is way easier. I don't know how it is in Final Fantasy, but I do feel like our difficulty for normal
mode in Guild Wars 2 is a lot harder than normal mode in Final Fantasy.
So I think even like a quick finder like that might still present people with problems, right? Because you then have to really then filter it with experienced and non-experienced. Whereas in WoW, you don't need it because the normal mode in WoW is killable with any experience. Like you could be carried in the whole experience and you wouldn't know it. So the way they implement it in Guild Wars 2 would have to actually take into account the difficulty of the instanced content.
Yeah. I've like thought about it before, what an automatic party finder system would look like. And actually, I'll maybe like talk about it a little bit. I know it's a bit of a derail specifically from gold making, but I feel like sometimes people kind of get locked into the idea of the meta, right? And it makes sense because the meta, it works, right? It's like when you have 2 healers and hybrid boon providers, and then the rest DPS, people are on specific builds, classes, that sort of thing. It works, right? But something that I usually try to like bring up to people is that you don't need to run that, right? And it's kind of almost like the meta is a self-fulfilling prophecy because all the meta is it's a way for people to know what to do to get the clear. And the example that I always use is like Kadim the Peerless, right? So there's like organized strategies where you know exactly where to drop the fire. And then there's the pug strategy where you just drop them kind of inefficiently, right, to clear the fight, but it makes sense. It's simple enough that most people kind of know how to do it. I feel like if there ever were to be some sort of party finder, that sort of thing, people would eventually come up with strats, essentially make a new meta, right? Like right now we have like pug meta and static metas, right? Maybe eventually there might be like a party finder meta, right? Like a new way that people kind of come up with. And it's like, yeah, this seems really efficient on how we can clear this with people that might not know what they're doing. So maybe just like a little bit of food for thought. So
You can convert a fight like Dagda or whatever the other guy's name is
Thuris.
very, very easily into a party finder fight, right? Like maybe you have one healer per subgroup and you're ready to blast. You really don't need anything else. Reflects are nice. Knowing which one to hit during like the separation is nice. But in reality, I've gone in there with a group of entirely new players who have never touched that content before. I didn't explain anything. I said, okay, if we wipe, I might explain something. Just feel it out. We had like 1 or 2 deaths. Yeah, the damage took a while. But if you just like lower the health number in a party finder that like has instant queuing, make sure you get 1 or 2 healers, make it to where you can just tag up like, oh, I can heal. It solves itself. Like I think if we look at it from a perspective of raid, it gets very, very complicated, right? A lot of fights like Kadim 2 and things like that, it does get complicated because you need people to do the pylons, you need X, Y, Z, you need healers, you need a tank. But if you look at these strikes that are coming out, they are very much kind of easy to get into and they are not advertised enough. We need that kind of one button entry. We need some way to tag up and just show what we're running. That would help out with not just with instance content, but also open world and arguably PvP and World v World too. Why can't we just right click on our little portrait and say, oh, this is what I'm providing. Give you a little icon for healing, give you a little icon for a laugh
like
or quickness.
I will play a little devil's advocate here. If you have to volunteer that information yourself, it's really difficult, right? Like I know in Final Fantasy, you're
Gear
automatically
check.
yeah, I mean, like yes, like I feel like this conversation it can be very complicated. I feel like the easiest way to do it is just check the stats, right? Like, I mean, not like maybe not a gear check specifically so other players can see your gear because we all know ANET's never gonna do that, right? But like if there were a system in the game itself, right, where it's like let's say if there was a party finder queue system, whatever it's called, you would be classified as a healer if your healing stat is above a certain threshold, right, or something like that, or like you would be classified as a tank if your toughness is above a certain threshold. The only thing I do push back is I don't think it should be voluntary because if it's the player that's volunteering the information themselves, that is just ripe for abuse, right? Like you could queue up as something that you're absolutely not as at all, and I feel like that's very dangerous. But Yeah, I don't know.
I want to say I'm completely fine with it. As someone's played a lot of World of Warcraft, I've queued in as a healer and just gone to the DPS spec, and I'm comfortable enough to like heal and DPS at the same time and carry the entire group on DPS. And you know what? If people are going to abuse it, I would rather there be a system that allows people to act properly and have it to where everything runs smoothly that can be abused than not have that system at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot to be said about this topic, but one thing that I did kind of want to highlight though is that if isn't there kind of like a public system already? Like if you do like public Dragonstorm or
Yeah.
public
Yeah.
Marionette or whatever it's called, that sort of thing. That's a pseudo queuing system, right? It's like all it's doing is it's just putting people into the same instance and everything. I have wondered if because I always like to think like with existing systems because building systems from the ground up that just takes a lot of developer bandwidth and we can talk about it as much as we want, but I highly doubt ArenaNet would actually do anything about it. But something that could be interesting if there was like a public instance of these fights, just so people can go in and practice them, right? Like I remember Sneb, you've brought this up a lot, right? It's like if you want to like learn how to do Doom Greens or something, there's no way to practice that outside of getting people to do it yourself. So I always have wonder. Imagine if there's like a public instance of Wing One, right? And it's like, let's say, like if you wipe to it, there's like some sort of like emboldened mechanic, right? Where it's like every time you wipe, you get extra health, you get some extra damage, or like that sort of thing. And then that could be a potential way for people to just go in, maybe mess around with it, see what some other people are doing. Of course, that brings in a whole thing with like balance, right? It's like how many people do
Yeah.
you allow in the instance? How much health should the boss have? Like what's the rewards for such a thing? That sort of thing. But just kind of as a thought bubble, right? It's like the public instance system does already exist in the game.
Why does it
So,
not work?
I mean, a big part is like people don't know where it is,
I
right? Like
actually,
this is the classic.
I
It's
want to
like it's
ask
an
this
accessibility
question
thing.
because I've never done the emboldened raids. So I
Mhm.
actually don't know like how different are they from
I can
normal
speak to
mode?
this if you'd like.
Yeah.
Um, so emboldened raids are super fascinating because they certainly do help you get the kill. But okay, so the way they function is you go in, you have emboldened on, you get like a little extra HP, and you do a little bit more damage, right? So you're a little bit tankier and you do more damage. So every time you die, you get another stack up to 5 stacks, and at 5 stacks, you're just like godlike. you do so much damage, and you have so much health, right? And so you almost guarantee yourself the kill at a certain point in time, right? However, the reason emboldened is kind of strange is because it actually disproportionately affects some fights more than others, and on some fights it actually makes dealing with the mechanics harder, or you don't deal with them at all. So, for example, on Kadim 1, if you have 5 stacks and you're at the phase where you're attacking Kadim and Kadim does the slam attack, typically that'll like wipe your group if people won't, dodge it or whatever, right? But when you have 5 stacks of emboldened, it like doesn't touch you. So people actually don't learn that mechanic very well because they don't really need to engage with it when they have emboldened. So emboldened is really good because psychologically it tells players, hey, I have a stronger chance of getting the kill eventually, even if I'm not going to get it the first 2 or 3 pulls. I probably get it because it's going to get easier as we go. So psychologically, it helps people stick with the team. But there are some pretty big consequences to having it set up the way it is because it still doesn't really teach you all of them. It's better than nothing, but there are some mechanics on some bosses that are just completely invalidated, and therefore if you went to try to do normal, you'd have a pretty tough time because you just haven't had to deal with that mechanic.
Yeah, I agree. I think actually, obviously in an ideal world, I don't know if they're necessarily going to do this. I think Emboldened would have been the perfect easy mode, right?
Yep.
It's like the if you look at Super Adventure Box, you have like the Rainbow one and then the Tribulation one or whatever it's called. Emboldened would have been a great easy mode, right? Like whether or not you get less rewards, maybe you don't get the mastery point associated with killing the boss on normal or something like that. I feel like it would have been a great just like entry level step, right? Because you could say the exact same thing with tier 1 through tier 4 fractals, right? Like in tier 1, you can take all the mechanics with no healer, no boons. You don't have protection. You don't have resistance. You can still face take everything, right? But it kind of like ramps up over time. And then I think this is again kind of like the player perception, right? The player perception is that yeah, tier 1s are easier than tier 4. A lot of the things that I can get away with tier 1, I'm not going to be able to get away with in tier 4, right? Like that's just already an established perception. Whereas I feel like sometimes actually a really big thing is sometimes people don't even know which wing is emboldened out. And then I feel like that's kind of where the mismatch happens, right? It's like because then you go in and let's say like you're not paying attention to like the emboldened text or whatever it's called, or you didn't see the symbol when you entered the raid wing. Then you think, oh, this is the normal mode or something like that, right? So then I can just face tank these bosses. And then the next time you do that wing and you don't have the emboldened, if you're not paying attention, then all of a sudden you can't tank the mechanics. I feel like a lot of that actually comes down to like a clarity thing, right? So it's just like the fact that you can't even see which wing is emboldened unless you actually go to Lion's Arch Aerodrome is already kind of like a bit of a red flag to me. So
I am so
Yeah.
in darkness about all of this. Like here's my brutal take. I'm just gonna say it. The people want to hate on this, they're welcome to. I don't really care. The reality is that a lot of these raids, it's not even really about the mechanics. Some of them are a little bit more difficult than others, and especially some of the CMs are pretty difficult. You're gonna have to practice them. But especially in a lot of the fights in the first 4 wings, it's not necessarily so much about knowing everything in perfection as it is about just playing something that makes sense and bringing a lot of support. The DPS checks are not super high, but we have this culture of like the standard comp is XYZ. If you played 4 healers, and then 6 DPS, you'd kill every single boss easily. Like seriously, imagine playing 2 heal firebrands and then like 2 heal mechs and just pumping Aegis and stability out constantly and going through all of the fights. You'd have almost no problem killing any of them. But when people go in, they try to play as if they're really, really experienced, and they limit their healing and they follow these builds that are maybe a little bit more razor thin than they ought to be. And as a result, they go in and they struggle a little bit. I like embolden certainly gives people a lot of confidence, but what I've found is that a lot of people, they go, oh, these aren't even close to as hard as I perceive them to be, or they're not as hard as I really thought they would be as soon as I put on a build that makes sense, or as soon as I put gear that matched my build. I think it's all of the systems that come before getting there that are really confusing to people or significantly misunderstood. They get to that point and they're like, holy crap, this is exceptionally difficult. It's not that raids themselves are exceptionally difficult. It's that the compounding of understanding all of the systems with the mechanics makes them even more difficult than they actually are. The moment you understand the systems and how your team can kind of function together is the second that most of the raids become kind of like, oh, well, literally we could all stand here and press a few buttons and auto attack and this would eventually die because we can just out heal all of this stuff. But
yeah, I mean, I agree because the way you can think of emboldened is it targets the 2 aspects of build crafting, right? It's like when you think about build crafting, you think about how much damage can you take, and then you also think about how much damage you can put out, right? Like this is not unique to Guild Wars 2. This is in every game. Path of Exile, League of Legends, whatever it's called. Every build basically boils down to those 2 things. And what emboldened basically does is it does those 2 things for you, right? It's like because you gain more health every time you wipe, it's essentially making it so that you can take more damage, right? You can take more incoming damage, which effectively serves the same purpose as things like protection or resolution or that sort of thing. And then similarly, right, it's like when you have greater damage output, that's essentially fixing how much power and condition damage you have, like how many like stacks of might or quickness and alacrity that you have. So I do agree. I do think a lot of this kind of comes down to like a lot of the stuff that comes before. I 100% agree with that. But I do also
people
think
often sorry, go ahead.
no, I couldn't tell if you were lagging and you talked to me. You're still kind of fuzzy.
Yeah, Discord is really scuffed right now.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Discord. I found it. I fixed it. Well, I fixed it. Wow. Okay.
He's back.
Chat,
He's
you better
back.
subscribe to me. It's the last day of September. Give me 100 subs. I just fixed it. Nice. Okay.
Fix it for now.
Give me 100.
I honestly have no idea. This is like something that's just recently happened. So this breaking, I'm literally finding out about it on stream right now. I'm going through the experience. But yeah, to go back to emboldened, before you elaborate on that, I actually, that's actually interesting that you brought up that like you can basically eat through the mechanics. So in a way, it gives you that extra boost to complete it, right? But at the same time, it's like a detriment because if you just blast through the mechanics, you actually won't know how to do the mechanics like the normal way, right?
People don't know how to do the mechanics anyways.
Yeah. Raids, man. It's so frustrating. They're just so misunderstood. That look, it's not about the damage. You know why it's not about the damage? It's not about the damage because the damage requirements to kill the raids before they enrage is so low. It is incredibly low. It is very, very, very low. Right? The best of the best teams are killing these bosses with like 9 minutes remaining on the enrage timer, right? So if you are 10% of what they are, 10%, then you should be able to do it.
Do I know
And
something funny?
and
When we were
everyone's
doing
capable of that.
when we were doing
Yeah, go
our
ahead.
blind raids, entirely new people to Guild Wars 2, never really touched any of this content before, figuring it all out for the first time, didn't really have quickness, didn't really have alacrity. We were on the enrage timer, blind raiding, not guided. People new to Guild Wars, right? All of these things, right? And we were still beating these bosses traditionally within the enrage timer. Samrog, right? Our very first time killing that, we probably had about 6 people alive by the end, still within the enrage timer. The DPS checks are very easy to meet. I do think that Guild Wars 2 does have an interesting, unique problem, or hurdle at least, where it is the MMO that requires you to know your class, sort of, the most before you walk into a raid. If you walk into a raid in World of Warcraft and you do absolutely garbage damage, you know what? Things are still going to fall over. They're still going to die. You're not really going to be affecting people too negatively. It's not like where if you provide poor quickness in this game, your auto attack drops from like 10k damage on like a ranger all the way down to 2k damage, right? Bad quickness can be very, very noticeable. While in World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy, most of the time you're providing maybe 10% to your other raiders. There's a lot of kind of hurdles for people getting into raiding in Guild Wars 2, but it's typically not the raids. And Embolden should work as the kind of stopgap to where people can get into raiding for the first time, but it doesn't do that well because it's on a weekly kind of rotation. People don't really know about it. Me as a new player, I didn't know it until I was like into Wing 4. This was probably 2 months of me playing the game, a month and a half or so of me raiding. I didn't know what Embolden was until I saw the big letters. Oh, this is Embolden? Oh, cool. We're going to do the scam anyways. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I know like we kind of like derailed here because the original idea was like gold making and everything, right? But like I also do want to point out that a lot of that initial investment into like getting your build up and running and all that kind of stuff that is tied to gold. And I feel like sometimes in a way there's almost this pseudo chicken and egg sort of scenario that happens where it's like there's I want to first highlight here, this is the perception. I actually think the reality is very different from this, but the perception is that you need to go into raids, you have to have like this like specific gear set, you need like ascended and all that kind of stuff, and getting your first set of ascended gear you need like a couple hundred gold from that, and then oh no, okay, now I have to like I also need to like be able to play multi-class stuff. Oh no, okay, that's another like set of gear that I need to set up. And in addition to that, right, it's like there's a lot of investment into the non-gold parts of your build, right? Like even just getting hero points. Like I know for a lot of very casual players, they don't even know that hero point trains exist, right? Like I remember I distinctly ran into this because I ran a lot of HV trains back in the day. I still run them every now and then. And every single time I do that, there's always people are like, what is this? Do people do this all the time? Like, what? You're just getting me all of the hero points in like what, 2 hours? Right? Like, their mind is blown because I think for a lot of these players, in part because of what Sneb said, the LFG is not very obvious at all. They don't know how to find these groups in the first place. They're just hacking away at these hero points, and it takes them a very long time to even get to that point, right? So it's like the perception that you need to have this build up and running, I feel like that is also a huge contributor to the gap, right? Of why people are not getting into this type of content. And kind of like, again, going back to it, because somebody mentioned it, we mentioned at the very beginning of the stream today, doing raids, especially for the first time, is very profitable. I think somebody included a link. It turns out that, yeah, even in clearing normal mode, you get the box of raider supplies. So I didn't check all of them, but I know it's at least the case for Wing 3 and Wing 4. So that means to get into raids, if you were to clear them, even once, that would probably fund your set of ascended gear, right? Like, it's, again, this is like where the chicken and the egg situation is. It's like there's this perception that you need ascended gear to get into raids, and then you do raids, and then it's profitable, and then you can make more ascended gear, whether that's through the magnetized shards or just the raw guild that you get, all that kind of stuff. But I would say that the reality is actually very different, right? Like you can very, very easily raid with rare or exotic gear. Like even just the
100%.
stat boosted
Oh.
or like level 80 boosted. All right, go ahead.
Okay, I wouldn't tell people that I mean, you can do it with rare gear, but there's no point in buying rare gear when exotic gear is so incredibly cheap.
Agreed. I was mostly saying that
Well,
for
please
like,
don't buy rare gear. Just buy exotic.
No. Buy the rare gear. Buy my rare gear on the trading post.
Oh, true.
It's rare for a
Buy it
reason,
so that
boys.
I can get my
Feed the
echos
barons
and everything.
Yeah. But
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
But I guess the main point I want to make is the level 80 boosted like celestial gear is more than enough for people to get into raiding, right? But that perception just like doesn't exist. So it's like, in a way, almost like this chicken and an egg situation doesn't actually exist. It's perceived to exist, but it's, yeah.
To
Go
me,
ahead.
it all comes back to one issue. It really only comes back to one issue. You can't get groups unless you play a very specific way, because you also can't make groups to play a specific way unless you have the commander tag and all. You are confined based on these systems, and the LFG and the commander tag systems have absolutely destroyed progression mentality and really inhibit players who are new from making groups with other players who are new. It's the experienced players who've already gone through this that buy the tag, and then they just look for other experienced players. This is a really, really big issue because it makes the funnel very complicated. Suddenly you have to go to all these discords to find people to play with. You have to go through all these extra steps when it just should be so simple. You just make a group or join a group that has similar expectations, but you can't do that if you don't have the tag, or you can, but it's super complicated and doesn't usually pan out. I find it so frustrating because I imagine that if you're a player, you want to get into raids, like, okay, well, I just want to play with other people who are maybe around my skill level, but you can't find any of them because none of them have the means to create a group. Like it is obscene that the most integral part of social play and cooperative play in Guild Wars 2 is barred behind an arbitrary gold sink when
I do think it needs to be.
To get that gold, you kind of have to play cooperatively.
You know, the funny thing is, there are people who have, and this goes back to the rifts. Actually, there's a lot of people have the tag and haven't also used it either, because like it's just nervousness or something to commanding. And I do agree. I think that the commander tag honestly should be free. I don't think I don't know. They have the stats on it, but I do think they could find a different funnel for that 300 gold.
I have a
locked
couple
behind
thoughts
an
on that.
achievement, but
Yeah, I was gonna
that's
say
fine.
it could be really cool if it was like a mastery track, right? Because you have the mastery track for the mentor tab. I feel like if there was a mastery track for that, you would need to actually invest your time into the game, but you're investing the time into the game, I think, just through the normal means already, right? And I feel like a big reason why it's probably not completely free is because then bots and all of that kind of stuff, like it's those guys are the reason why we can't have good things and that sort of stuff. But I will also say, maybe speaking a little bit in defense of Arena, and I feel I'm gonna bring up the sky scale here as an example, right? It's like the initial way that you got sky scale was very long, very time consuming. Like if you weren't well versed in how to like do like LS4 trains and stuff, it would take you a long time to get it, right? But they introduced a almost retroactive system to getting sky scale, right? Essentially, at least they have historical precedent where they have had something difficult to attain and then in hindsight added an easier way to get it. So maybe this is copium, maybe this is me just being like, an ANET white knight or that sort of shill. I don't think it's off the table that they would make the commander tag easier to access. I think especially if like, influential people in the community were to raise enough of a fuss about it, which I like to think that we kind of are, because I also agree. I think at the very least 300 gold is a very steep price for it, right? And I also think that in addition to people getting it, I feel like there should be some sort of in-game system that actually teaches you how to use the squad, right? Like how to put down markers. Right? I think for most people, if you don't have somebody telling you, the only way to even know that you can put down markers is to go into your keybinds and see what the automatic keybinds are for that, which I think that's just like silly, right? It's like, I feel like you should be able to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
How to do that because the game told you. So
To answer someone, Commander Tag was 100 gold in the beginning of the game. That was when it was character bound, not account bound. So back then, 100 gold for a Commander Tag would only get it to you on the character you bought it for. So if you wanted to command on your other characters, yeah, you had to have bought it again on another character. This is why they just combined it into just a 300 gold for like a one-time investment. Yeah, I don't agree with it being tied behind a gold amount. I think an achievement or a mastery system would be better. And I do agree, like there isn't actually anything that tells you that you can set up markers with the tag. You kind of just have to stumble upon it. And yeah, it's kind of like it's like a backwards sort of thing, right? Like you need the very thing, like you said, Sneb, to be able to set up groups to do the stuff that you want to do, but you need also a lot of money to get the thing that gets you to even get, you know, what you want to end up doing as content. And yeah, I think something like this definitely needs to be changed. With the Ascended stuff, I do think they've introduced way too many systems now that it should be easy. I mean, we have you can get Ascended with raids, PvP, world versus world. You can get it through strikes. You can get it through fractals. However, I think the new system with Wizard's Vault also has actually, the way I see it, right? With Wizard's Vault, you can buy the chest, right? You can buy like 3 Ascended chest pieces. Not chest pieces, 3 Ascended like armor pieces per season, which is like what, every 2 months. So the way I see stuff like that is like that actually can really help supplement someone's like Ascended journey, right? You get your Ascended chest piece from the Wizard's Vault because that is usually, the chest is like the most expensive item to get in your gear. You get the leggings, and then you could get 1/3 item, right? Then you have 3 more pieces because it's a total of 6 to gear up your armor. So if you get 3 pieces of the Ascended armor just through the Wizard's Vault, and this is as a new player. As a new player, this is probably phenomenal. You get 3 pieces through the Wizard's Vault, which is playing and doing stuff in the game. The other 3 pieces, you go about it through other content, whether that's in raids, fractals, or strikes. Even if you just do the easy ones from Icebrute Saga, those are the easiest ways to get the other 3 times. Yeah, it really has helped a lot. And I think, yeah, to this point, I don't find that Ascended should be a problem. I don't know. I think the only issue of getting Ascended at this point, to me, I see as more of like maybe people aren't aware that there are these places in the game that you can just acquire them without putting any money. It's more of like a time investment rather than it is a monetary investment in the game, right? Because back then you had to actually craft the Ascended, and they were also time gated. So the materials that you did were only craftable 1 per day of each material that was like tied to the Ascended. So it was a month, maybe months for some people before they can even get an Ascended gear. Versus now it's pretty much 2 weeks you should have your Ascended. And the Wizard's Vault certainly feels like it's catered towards also helping players who are more or less new to the game. Like Secrets of the Obscure certainly brings that feel like they have been trying to get people into this game. The fact that it's a different story, it kind of calls back, sometimes kind of breaks the fourth wall in the expansion, and it calls back to a bit of the previous saga we've been with the Elder Dragons. But it really is like, you know, Soto is like a fresh start for also players who want to just get into the game and just maybe don't want to do the rest of the content before, but want to get in from the latest expansion. And so these systems, I think, find it a bit easier for them to get in and get the gear at a faster pace, where you can even just skip the exotic, because at that point, you would have had it within 2 weeks max with your Ascended.
I'm gonna
I
butt
wonder if
in
they would
here.
ever. Oh,
Sorry. I'm gonna butt in here. As a new player, as a lazy player, and as a contrarian to my heart, honestly, I think the commander tag at 300 gold makes sense. It's completely fine. It doesn't need a change. The only change I would suggest is making it to where you can put down your markers and kind of command in a instance content. That doesn't need to be 300 gold. I think that's a little bit ridiculous, and it makes it harder for new players to get into. But from my perspective, guys, I made 700 gold without any help from Twitch chat, right? I had like 8 viewers when I was doing this, right? While going through the story of HOT and just like PvPing maybe like once a day for like 3 times or something like that, I was making 700 gold. People were asking me how I was doing it. My friends that have been playing this game for years were asking me how I was doing. I was just like, I don't know. I just played the game. I just
Yeah.
did some stuff and I had 700 gold. I could buy my own commander tag. I was getting pretty close to being able to buy the Griffin and things like that, right? You can make just a lot of money on this game without knowing anything by being incredibly lazy and just kind of going about your business. And I think as a new player, I shouldn't have a commander tag. Like
Yeah.
there's
I
a
think
little bit of a requirement of knowledge to have a commander tag and to be actually a valuable commander tag. And I think if everyone could just like pop up a tag, start putting out markers, it would be an actual negative to the game. I mean, what were you gonna say?
Okay, I was gonna say actually, it's interesting that you brought that up because I don't know if Emma mentioned to you because the reason why I remember we talked about it in the first place is he asked me how easy do I find it to make 100 gold, right? And it's like I'm actually very much in your sphere here, where it's like making 100 gold in the game. I risk sounding like a bit of like a streamer bias, that sort of thing, is genuinely not that hard. But making 100 raw gold that's in your wallet, I think that's hard. It's the gap from going your materials to the liquid gold that you can buy like the commander tag and everything for. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. And the reason why
Yeah.
I bring this up is isn't PvP one of the few ways where you actually get like a lot of raw gold?
Yeah.
I think from whenever you play like open world and stuff, you actually don't get that much liquid. You get a way more materials, but you don't really get as much just like, oh, it's just sitting there in my wallet and I can kind of spend it however. So I feel like that's kind of like point number one. Not saying that you're wrong, but I will also say I feel like in a way, almost the sense of like the commander tag as a new player shouldn't have it sort of thing. I'm half wondering if maybe that's just because of almost like the community perception of it, right? It's like the community perception that the commanders are the people that you go to when you have a lot of knowledge about stuff, right? But I would say that not really in the game is that actually like explicitly stated, right? Because I think actually, especially for like the people that have been playing the game for a very long time, the commander tag is just a tool, especially a tool to put down markers. I feel like that is kind of like the core system that I think should be available everywhere, right? It's like
Yeah.
putting down markers so you can mark things. I think that would be absolutely invaluable, like especially in fractals, right? Like for example, I'm just going to use like some of the CM fractals here as an example. If you could put down markers and tell people, hey, go to these markers at specific times and whatever it's called, I think that's a core functionality that
Not
everybody
being able
should
to put
definitely.
down markers is ridiculous. It should
Yeah.
definitely be core.
Yeah. So I think we're honest. I feel like you're probably on the same page with a lot of people. I think the idea of like a commander, right? Like someone who's like at the lead of everyone. Yeah, I don't think new players should have that. But I also think that that perception is kind of like almost a byproduct of the system that we have now. Not because that is the system that ANET intended. That makes it. So, yeah.
And I think the community's use of the commander tag is actually a very positive one coming from other MMOs. Like being able to see a commander tag say, okay, that's a JP finish, I can TP to friend there, or hey, that's a meta event going on here, or maybe it's something interesting that I don't know about and I can go engage with it. There's almost like that window shopping vibe to it whenever you go into a map and you see a commander tag. There's a little bit of a value in that, like how we were saying that should be in LFG as well, to where it immediately tells you there's something to do here. And you don't have that in any other MMO. And I think it's in explicit, massive value. And I would hate to see that go. If anyone could put
Yeah.
up like a little tag on the map, it would detract greatly in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
So
yeah.
I want to
Oh, go ahead.
jump in here quick. So going back to sort of the trading post and the idea that lots of the value that you get actually isn't liquid gold, it's in items. That is very confusing for players. And okay, let's put ourselves in the shoes of a player who, you know, they played a lot of MMOs when they were younger. Maybe they've got a couple kids now, and you know they like to be able to just jump in and play, kill some world bosses, do that sort of thing. Legendary armor might be kind of a bigger goal for them, but they just need to get the resources to do that. So they jump in and they've got maybe an hour a night to play, maybe, or maybe every once in a while they can play like for 3 hours at a time or something, but their time is pretty scattered. So they jump in, they kill a few world bosses, do a couple meta events, and then they log off. Every time they do that, they're collecting all of these resources, but their bags are constantly cluttered. There's constant stuff. They don't know what has value and what doesn't per se. They're not sure if they should save things or not save things. And if they do save things, they don't know where to put it because their bank only has so much space and they only have so many characters. And so they're stuck in sort of this constant indecision because there's so many choices for them to make. It's constant decision overload because they see that, okay, well, do I sell this or do I salvage it? Is there a better way to use this resource to get gold? And oh, I'm getting all this map currency now. What do I do with this currency to get myself gold? And oh, I need to sell this on the trading post. But guess what? All of that takes time. They simply don't have the time to constantly be thinking about and making those decisions. So I think for the average player, they may have all of these resources, but they might just be like, man, like, I guess I could spend some of my valuable gaming time constantly trying to sell everything, but it's just cumbersome to do so. Or, you know, I don't want to make a bad choice, so I make no choice at all. And maybe that sounds silly when we think of it like that, but I actually think that's a pretty real issue. A lot of players don't want to make a mistake, and so they just hoard.
And that's actually what spawns a lot of the problems in the game, is like the hoarding mentality, right? It's you open up your inventory, deposit all, and most players, granted, it's not like unique to just a specific set of people. Like even myself, I'll forget that I have something in the bank, and then when I need it, I'll go check for it, right? I think the problem is a lot of people do just deposit materials, forget about it, and then someone might forget they even have the stuff, right? Like that. But then it's also, and this is the issue I always find. I bring this up recently because I've been bringing this example up a lot in the last few weeks. Players don't know, or for some reason find it difficult to sell stuff that they don't need now to get stuff that they are working towards now, as I'm prioritizing the now. I think like I get this example a lot with someone saying, I have 250 powerful bloods. I have 500 venom sacks. I need 500. I need what's it called? But I actually need a full stack of another powerful bloods, right? I need 500 powerful bloods. I'm like, okay, you need the venom sacks? They're like, no. All right, so sell that, and then whatever you need, just buy the extra set of powerful bloods. No, I might use that for something later. Okay, but when is later? Later is like 2 months, 3 months. Yeah,
a year.
Like, look, like you might as well sell the excess now to kind of just shortcut your time spent getting whatever it is you're trying to work towards. But it's always that like I might need it later. But the thing is, by the time you reach the later, you would have already saved up probably a stack again or something like that. And I think this is where players just don't, for some reason, make that sort of assessment. It's like, no, I'd rather keep it rather than try to work towards it later. However, this game gives you a lot of materials. If you're playing open world, fractal strikes, even if you just go about open world, there's like a lot of open world trains and things like that will give you very specific materials and currencies that you can just go about your day, right? You just figure out which days you want to run what. So when you're thinking of like goal number 2, like the second weapon or the third weapon 3 months in advance, when you kind of need the stuff that you need for, weapon right now, like the one that you're going to make right now, I think that adds a lot of time investment. So what typically would take someone 20 hours, they've added like an extra 35, or like, sorry, like they've made it like into 35 hours of grinding, right? So I think that is where most people just also don't really make that sort of assessment. It comes down to resource management, right? Like it's not even making gold. It's not even how do I make this? What are the secret methods of money making? Because to be honest, there aren't any secret methods. It's like all of them are out there. The Overflow Discord, actually, one of the biggest detriments is that we've pretty much put everything there is to make money out into like the public forum, and the only thing that's remaining is just like knowing when to apply those methods, right? It's not so much knowing it, it's also when to do it. So I find most players just don't make that assessment with their materials. It's like, when do I need to use this? If I don't need to use it now, do I need to keep it? Like, it just comes down to that. Yeah.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, it's like I think there's this hyperfixation with doing things the absolute optimal way, right? It's like I think that's a really big part of it. And at least speaking personally, whenever I like stream and stuff, I always try to tell people it's like you can min max the ever loving shit out of this thing. But you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna sell it. I always tell people, do as I say, not as I do. Right? Like I instant sell everything on the TP nowadays. I like
Yes.
I just like salvage everything with my copper fed salvage-o-matic. I don't bother doing like all of the rune crafting things anymore. Like every now and then I'll just like sell a random thing and then like on the trading post just to get rid of it because I finally hit the 2.5k cap and all that kind of stuff, right? It's like I feel like sometimes, and to be fair, this is again we kind of like talked about this before, like especially with in regards to rating, right? It's like there's this idea that you need to do things perfectly, and if you don't do things perfectly, then it's like what Step said, it's like you may as well just not do it at all. Whereas I feel like a lot of people would honestly benefit from just sell it, right? Just do it. Don't even expend that much mental brain power into it. Just see the shiny button, click the shiny button, get your money, and then move on with your day. I feel like there's a lot of I think both pressure from the community and from people themselves, where it's like, if I don't do it this way, it's almost like I'm worried that people are going to judge me for it, right? And I feel like, anyway, this is actually, it's like a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because if you were to ask people in Mapcha, like, how do I do this thing, or how should I like process this thing, or something like that, you're gonna get 5 different answers from 5 different people, each telling you how they do it and all that kind of stuff, and then you're like overloaded with information. It's like, oh, which one do I actually pick, right? So it's like, I don't know if there's anyone listening that's kind of worried about it, just pick one. A couple of copper saved here or there, it's like, sure, it adds up in the long run, but if that's not something you're interested in, if you're not interested in becoming like this super big guild, or what is it called, baron or something like that in Guild Wars 2, that couple of copper, it's not going to make for you. So
The Barons probably aren't even worrying about the couple of copper when it comes down to the numbers that a casual player are probably bringing in, right? Like even if you had 250 UIDs, right, green UIDs, like that's a couple of copper there probably isn't going to utterly change the way that you're making gold. Like people who are making a lot of money in these games, a lot of money in these MMOs, are typically making a lot of money when it comes to a mass amount that they're probably working with off the TP or some other kind of trading formats, right? I'm just assuming that from my previous experience with other MMOs, right?
Yeah,
I know.
honestly, no, I will say this. I mean, like most people think that it's like, if you're not doing this. Honestly, guys, I say this from a perspective of like where I've been in the game. Honestly, having a lot of gold actually ruins the game. And I'll be honest here. I actually wish I didn't spend enough. I wish I didn't spend a lot of time actually, delving into the money making. I enjoy it. It's like a passion of mine. I've delved into it in different MMOs, Guild Wars 1, RuneScape. Not so much in WoW. More like on if I needed something. In Guild Wars 2, it just became a thing that the economy was just really interesting. But I will say it ruins the experience because I think the moment my value in the game shot up like insanely high in like 2015, and to give the context for anyone who's watching this who doesn't know, basically like I made a lot of the gold through gift of mastery selling, right? Like someone has a gift of mastery, I bought it from them, I made the weapon, and then they send me the weapon, I pay them for the service of that, and I just sell it on the trading post, right? And I was pretty much one of the first people to latch onto that, and I've, since 2015 used all of that to expand into different money making, unidentified gear, all of that. I will say it ruins the experience because before that I actually used to raid, not raid, but fractal, PvP, world versus world a lot, and then it became more of an obsession of just how high can I see this number go. And yeah, some of that came with passions of like creating a trading community, and certainly we've done that with Overflow. I'm actually very happy with how Overflow turned out. I didn't expect like this kind of thing would come true, but it did. But it's not a healthy thing to have. I actually think I ruined my experience in Guild Wars 2 in the long run. Yeah, like I have no motivation to really raid if I don't really feel like it. Like I've actually, Sneb knows this. I tried to create a static group. I didn't even care to really put a date down. It literally like Sneb was like, you choose the day and I will have a name, and he had a very good name reserved for me. I just didn't find it, like I don't know. I just was like, whatever. I don't think I need legendary arm. It's ruined the
Min-max
experience.
the fun out of the game.
Yeah,
But
so
that's how I usually refer to it. We
That's
min-max the
not
fun out
your
of the game.
fault.
yeah. So I would say it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. If you enjoy it, if you like spreadsheets, if you like, just seeing how far things can go, great. It's not for everyone. You don't have to be making 100, 200 gold a week. However, I do think there should be some sort of like, knowledge into like just how to interact with the system, right? How to engage with the game system. So that if you require it, then there are these places in check, right? Because yeah, I think it does boil down to like just asset management, right? Just you have resources in the game. What do you do with them, right? And then you just take it from there.
Mark my words, one of these days I'm gonna start an inventory cleaning service. I'll like download Zoom and then I'll like turn on like the remote control, whatever it's called for people, and I will clean people's inventory for them.
I'll pay.
Keep an eye out. 2024 Emmy's inventory cleaning service. I'll do it free of charge because honestly, just looking at messy inventory just takes years off my life.
I think you might actually crumble when it comes to my characters because they're very yeah. Actually, yeah, Teapot as well. Yeah, I'm not sure if you
I
want
saw
to.
Teapot clean his inventory one time. He just sold all of exotics to his vendor.
Do you know what I did for my
Oh.
inventory, Emmy? I literally just took everything from Guild MM, the character, and I shoved it into like a new character, and I just kept it there. It's like a locked closet. And I have not yet even logged into that character.
I think the less you worry about things, the more you just do what's fun, the better the game. That's my opinion. If I had all the gold in the world, you know what I'd do? I'd raid when I feel like it. I'll PvP when I feel like it, just like I do now. I'm poor as shit, but that's life.
Yeah, honestly, I can confirm that too. It's like I have enough money to buy whatever I want in the game and stuff. And the vast majority of the time that I spend in the game now is playing with other people, right? Like I kind of mentioned it earlier in the stream. I literally do raids on the same account 3 or 4 times a week, right? Like just whichever raid people end up needing. It's like, oh, you needed wing 4. We already did wing 4 for somebody else's heart earlier this week. Let's do it again, right? Or something like that. So that's obviously making me negative gold per hour because I'm the one footing the bill for the food and like all the in the guild storage and stuff. But I do it anyways because it's fun that way. But
Part of the
I do also
experience.
think, yeah, I do also think though, I imagine there's a lot of people that are listening to this that do want to make some gold. And I feel like as with most things, there's like a balance, right? Like don't just throw gold out a window. There are definitely small easy optimizations that you can make that would overall enhance your gameplay, right? Like I feel like a very, very good or a basic example of this is very basic unidentified geared process, right? It's like I feel like the very standard way of doing it that's low effort. I think like once you learn it once, you know it forever sort of thing is just open all of the gear, salvage greens and blues with the copper fed, and then salvage the yellows with the silver fed. If or whatever the equivalent is, if you don't have like the infinite ones. I feel like just doing that, it's a very small basic optimization. Once you know it once, you never have to do it again. It will probably make you just a couple of extra like gold or silver here or there. So it's like
I mean, honestly, I want to say like the biggest investment you can make is the copper fed. It's probably the best one. The first thing you should try to go for. Honestly, on the gem store.
yeah, honestly, just as a convenience item, not even for a gold making.
I want to speak up from the lazy boy perspective. Snap, you can go first. I feel like we're both lazy boys.
I kind of agree, but I kind of disagree. If we're talking about like a hardcore player that's gonna get bag slots and gonna do these things, then yeah, it probably makes sense. But if we're talking about the casual player that's looking to make an extra couple gold here or there so that they can get their ascended armor and then eventually maybe legendary armor, I think they kind of want to play the game with the time that they have. And this is my bias. I will acknowledge that. I don't find opening unidentified gear to be playing the game. I find it like really.
It's not
extreme,
just opening the gear; it's also all the inventory slots it takes up, right? And you have to like kind of reorganize it. And then if you don't have a bunch of shared inventory stashes,
don't tell me
really
you
messy,
don't
really
love
fast.
Opening up all that stack of units, right? Watching it as it fills. your inventory row by row by row, and then you sort things out, and then you salvage, and then oh my god, you get materials.
I find it
and
a
then you
chore.
craft stuff with materials, and then you sell it to the masses.
I will
Listen,
also say, like, if that's the case, then you can obviously just sell the unidentified gears, right? But there's like obviously a lot of
Yes.
other small, other, like, it's not just limited to that. There's like a lot
No,
of
no,
other
no,
things
no.
you can do.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
another example that I might give people is like if you're in a guild hall, you can just go farm those resources every day, right? It's like
Yeah.
that's another small thing that you can do. You don't have to do it, but knowing that that possibility exists, I think is very important for a lot of people. And then like I guess like another one that usually a lot of people look over is if you're doing some sort of meta train or rift farming train or whatever it's called, use the boosters that you have, right? It's like speaking personally, I have a lot of characters with like hundreds of celebration boosters that I always think, oh, I'll save that for the time where I actually want to use it. You can just use those, right? And it like generates you a lot of extra experience and that's it. So yeah.
Chat,
Yeah.
if you want to be smart and make a lot of gold, listen to listen to Emmy. If you want to be dumb and lazy and make ends meet, just sell everything. You can buy it back when you need it. Sell it. Like, don't sell it to a vendor, obviously. Just sell it on the auction house. Leave it for a baron. You'll make some gold. You'll be able to buy whatever you need. Do you need legendary armor? Eventually, but you don't have to race for it. You get it over time. You kind of stack up your bills as they come. Oh, that's lovely. Now I have enough. I can make a big day out of making my legendary chest. Yahoo! Felt really nice for me. This is what I do. I'm incredibly lazy. I recommend it to anyone that feels overwhelmed by all this stuff. Just leave all the big brainy stuff to like people like You can come talk to them whenever you need a lot of gold. But then for the most part, when you're just going about your like average day, just stop stressing about the little things and just focus on what you want to do with that day. There's so many ways to make gold in this game, especially with things like the 90 gold you can make off of the weekly Astral Wizard Bolt. Like there's a lot of things you can do if you just stop stressing about the small things. You can leave yourself time to kind of stress about them in the future if you want to, but for your daily gameplay, you're just getting to the game. You can get enough gold for a griffin. Just vibe, dog. Just play the game.
Real game pads will right click delete eternal ice shards.
Oh, God.
True.
You know,
I literally
honestly,
think all you have to do to make gold is just show up to stuff, know what stuff to show up to, and then sell everything that you get. And I honestly think that's perhaps the biggest limitation for a lot of people is they just don't understand what they're actually getting and what has value. And so they just hoard it all and then they perceive that they have no gold. And they're kind of right. They have no liquid gold, but they have a lot of value in their storage. And so if people just show up and do things, if you have limited amounts of time, you can just go to events, and while the events are going on, sell stuff that's in your inventory, and you'll actually make quite a bit of gold. I think, and again, this is my personal bias, I just think it's unrealistic to tell the average player to do a lot of these nitty-gritty things. I think it's good if they know and are aware of them, because maybe sometimes they can do them, but most people aren't going to be able to do like a really big rotation of all of these different events or all the daily things. I think they just need to know, hey, you have stuff in your inventory when you play the game, you should sell that stuff to get gold. And then if you want to add a little bit to some kind of, I don't know, rotation of events or this little schedule that you do, then do it. But know that you can just get gold by playing.
You get a
Yeah.
lot of gold.
I would
from
also
just
say
playing.
it comes with like actually knowing what you're like. If you're going for something, like actually know what you need, right? Because you know you can't sell the items that you don't need if you don't even know what you do need, right? It's kind of that thing where, and this is where honestly Wiki, I really like that Guild Wars 2's wiki is embedded in the game. You can access it from in the game directly, and honestly, it is probably one of the strongest thing, probably the best wiki I've seen in an MMO. I don't know if there's, I don't like WoW's, was it Wowhead? It's not the best.
Quick tier list. Guild Wars S tier, WoW like B tier, Final Fantasy like I don't know, dumpster garbage like burning on fire tier. Like
There
it's
you go.
really bad.
So like I think yeah, the wiki is very good for like that kind of information, and also this website Guild Wars 2 Efficiency, it's probably the best website to figuring out what you have in your account. Like it will literally tell you everything. You just put all your API in it, and will tell you everything that your account has, from achievements, from materials, from currencies, how much progress if you're going for like a legendary, like or like an ascended or a certain set of skins, like just where you are in that process, what do you need remaining to fill it out. So information is definitely key, and I think honestly it is just consistency, right? Like most of you guys, you talked about just routine, right, at the start of this podcast, where you talked about just go farm a node in the guild hall, home instance, and you just play the stuff that you're doing in the game anyway, right? Like you're just playing the stuff that you do, and then the stuff that you get, you just figure out what to do with it later when you need it, right? It's not like you have to do that in every single day. Every single day, I need to know what I'm making, and it's like that. No, it's play the stuff and then just know what you're making out of, or at least a rough idea of what you actually get from the content that you do. So that you at least, once you open up your inventory, like, oh, okay, let me check the bank. I should have maybe something in this item or something like that, right? Because I've been doing fractals a lot, or I've been doing raiding a lot. Or even if you're doing open world on a very casual scale. I think the problem is most players who do play Guild Wars 2 definitely aren't people who maybe have 20 hours of game time. They maybe have 10 hours. There's a lot of players who I think have very little time, right? Like they have kids or family or work or obligations in real life that prevent them from playing more than maybe 10 hours a week. Like not 10 hours of Guild Wars 2, just 10 hours a week. That's all they can do for like gaming, right? And so, yeah, I won't say that you should be able to do this, and that, right? I think there is a disadvantage if time is not on your side. So whenever you play, you kind of have to like make the most of the time, but then you also want to play the stuff you do want to play, right? But that does create the dilemma. Like eventually, like if you're going to go for something that requires you to be like, let's say you don't like Heart of Thorns maps, but you need the currencies from those maps. You have to do it eventually. You might just be like, you know what, this week I'm just going to concentrate on that and I'll go back to playing the other maps that I enjoy the next week, right? Like maybe you enjoy DE or something. So you do have to at some point be realistic as well, I think, with your time management, right? If you're going to go for a goal and you know that like it's not the content you enjoy, but it's that it's like a roadblock for you to getting there, you're going to have to figure that out, right? Like it's just there's no other way around it, right? Either just, be like, I want to do this. I don't want to engage with it. Fine. But you don't get what you're trying to get. So it's just something you have to come into terms with. And I think most people don't like that they have to do it. But I see like, at some point in any game, in honestly anything you do in life, you probably have to go a little bit outside the comfort zone a little bit, right? Even me, every now and then I have to venture outside of the vault, every now and then. So likewise, it's with anything.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my thoughts on this have always like been the same. It's like at the end of the day, what's gonna make you the most money is what's gonna keep you playing the game the longest. Right? It's
100%.
like someone making 1 gold a day, but they play for 3 years. That's 3 years of 1 gold. That's gonna be a lot more than someone makes like, let's say, like 40 gold an hour, but then they burn out after half a year. Right. So
Mhm.
it's like at the end of the day, just playing the game will get you the most amount of money as long as you keep playing it. But at the same time, I also want to like maybe acknowledge there's probably a lot of people like listening here, probably twiddling their thumbs and they're like waiting. Okay, but like what's the real secret? What are you guys hiding? How do you actually make the money? Where are you guys getting all of these chalk infusions and that kind of thing? So I
Gambling,
mean
no.
it's true. Just gamble. Yeah.
Extreme gamba, that's what it is.
Gambling
But,
is effectively
you
neutral
know,
right now. You could make a lot. Just saying.
if I was going to give someone advice right now about how to make some gold as more of a casual player that maybe doesn't have, a ton of experience with raids or fractals or strikes or any of those things, I would say, hey, here's what you need to do. Go and just do all of the daily and weekly stuff. It takes you no time at all. You'll get a ton of astral acclaim. And then guess what? You will have a choice. If you needed ascended armor, you can get the ascended armor chests. If you needed, I don't know, if you needed like just raw gold, you can get raw gold. You can get all kinds of value from that. And it's really simple. It's easy to do. It's basically free, and it's telling you exactly what you need to do to get that gold. And then along the way, you'll probably get some extra value, whether it's map currencies or drops or resources or whatever. But frankly, like right now, I'm kind of busy with IRL. So what I've been doing when I log in is I just do random meta events, but I prioritize the Wizards Vault stuff. Just do everything that's in the Wizards Vault. You get a ton of astral acclaim, and you can get free gold, basically, for just playing. That's it. You just
Do
play
your
stuff. And it
weeklies.
diversifies it too. You get to play a little bit of whatever you want.
All right. Well, guys, I appreciate you guys for coming over here. Thank you guys for your time. I've actually had a lot of fun. I might actually try to do more of these episodes in the future where we kind of delve into like even maybe specifics. I know this was more broad terms as well, but yeah, I enjoyed this time a lot. So appreciate you guys having time to come up here. And before we wrap up, yeah, it's that time for you guys to chill. You know, we started with Sneb, Reed, and Emmy at the start of the podcast. I'm gonna do a different 180 now. We're gonna start with Emmy, Reed, and Snebzor. All right. So tell us who you are, what you do, and where can people find you? Emmy.
So my name is Emmy. I do a lot of endgame PvE shenanigans. So I do a lot of what I call YOLO runs, which basically means no expectations required. Even if you're here just to leech or mooch or whatever it's called, you know what? Gates are open. Come on in. We do weekly raids every week. Typically wings 1 through 4 is all welcome. And then 5 through 7 is more like semi-EXP. So ideally have killed the boss at least once. You don't have to be perfect with it. But other than that, we'll kind of take you through, get whatever collections you need, whatever achievements you need done, that sort of stuff, get you some legendary insights. Another really big thing that I do is I run a lot of progression groups. So I'm currently on group number 4 through the hardest content in the game, which is Harvest Temple Challenge mode. And this group is getting very close to the kill. We've gone to Suwon 2 like 6 times now. So kill is right there, right at the horizon. So we'll soon have a new batch of Voidwalkers. But other than that, I just usually like discuss things both from the new player and veteran player kind of perspectives on my stream. I tend to talk a lot about like my history with like gold making, history with rating, just like in general, that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, feel free to come by. I also have a cat. He's been actually hanging out on my desk like pretty much the entire time. So if you want to see a cat dance on stream, I got you.
Potato.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yep.
Okay. Reed.
All right. Hello, hello, hello. You guys may know me as Really Reed, not Riley Reed, no relation. Who am I? I'm still relatively new to Guild Wars 2 overall. However, at this point, we have done just about every bit of content blind. Generally, what you might find on my channel, twitch.tv/reallyreed, is oftentimes we're kind of going for these challenges, things like that, putting in a lot of hours and doing absolutely dumb stuff, probably in the worst way we possibly can. For example, what do we have coming up for this week? We're going to be going into hardcore Guild Wars 2 with Regal Power, Darren's with S, and all these other kind of gamers. And we're doing this big hardcore event where there's going to be a leaderboard and everything. People can join in. We're going to be doing hardcore raids, hardcore fractals, hardcore leveling, obviously. And we might be even ending it off with hardcore HDCM, which is one of the very few fights in the game that I have yet to complete. However, we did do just an event recently here in August where we went for an entire week straight, 7 whole days of just HDCM through the NA LFG. And it was sublime. In fact, Emmy actually stole a few of my raiders after we got them all prepped up. Not pissed, not mad, nothing. And then
I
didn't even
stole them
invite
and
me.
not you. How do you feel?
What was that?
I stole them and not you. How do you feel?
Exactly. I wasn't even asked. I think I did pretty well. I deserve some credit. Anyways, yeah, I'm cool. I'm good at the game. I'm bad at making gold overall, but I make ends meet and I beg. That's what I'm about, boys. Thank you for having me. That's
enough.
Twitch.tv, Really Read, and Really Read everywhere else as well. YouTube, Twitter, and I don't know, Facebook.
I was gonna say begging kind of does help sometimes in games. You know, have you tried? You know, in old school RuneScape in Guild Wars? So yeah, good money making goal. All right, well, Sneb, Goose Man.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm probably the most well known for having the Skane Gang Discord, which is a place where if you want to get into a raid group, we have over 100 teams. Raids or strikes, we have teams for those. So you can go in, you fill out a little form, express your interest, and then we put you on the team. Pretty much as simple as that. And then you go and you do your best, meet some new friends. We've had a few teams that have been running for almost 3 years, or maybe it is 3 years now, but a long time nonetheless. And so if you want to create a team in our system, you can also do that. We have internal leaderboards. We have a system where you can get ascended food. We have 3 guilds in the game. You also can join the guild or not join the guild and still be on a team. Totally up to you. I also stream. I have streamed a lot of raids. I'm focusing on IRL a lot right now. I'm actually taking a test called the GMAT in about a month. So I've been studying like 20 hours a week. So I'm pretty busy, but when I do stream, I'm kind of chilling and vibing with the chat lately. So that's me, I guess.
Nice.
Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Best of luck on that. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's me. And I'm Gildamem, top richest player in the game. I wear a crown and sunglasses, and I do a bunch of stuff in real life. But yeah, we also run the Overflow Discord. I'm also part of Hardstuck. Overflow is a place. If anyone wants to make money in the game, wants to learn about all the ways of making money, find other commanders to run meta trains or go with, and just be a part of meta trains. You can find us in the Overflow Discord. And just ask if you want to learn how to make money. You can also find a bunch of players always in voice channels, just teaching and everything like that. And yeah, you could also find me, and I've listed the other socials for all the streamers here today. You can find me on this. All of this is I'm on the internet and stuff, basically. You know, I'm on YouTube, Discord, Twitter, Instagram. I actually post a lot on my Instagram. If you want to find my day-to-day life of what an Oiler is like, just follow me on Instagram. I kind of post sometimes on my story. So yeah, that's it really. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and yeah, it was a very good discussion. All the links, everything there is going to be in the description, so you can find Emmy, Sneb, and Reed. All their socials are there. Go check them out, gamers, big raiders, big community gamers. And until then, I'll see you guys when I see you. I'll be right back on the stream, but we'll be right back here on the show. So until next time, YouTube, take care. Love you all. We'll see you when we see you.